Hello there. These days, I'm seeing the son of my boss. He's a handsome young man, much younger than me. I've been too embarrassed to tell anyone, but today I feel compelled to share my story online. I am a woman in her 50s. Let me introduce my family. I have a son and a daughter. Both are working now. I don't have a husband. My husband passed away when our eldest child was in middle school and became a star in the sky. He was devoted to his work, so much so that I used to say he seemed busier than the president. He would come home late on weekdays, and even on weekends, he would receive many work-related calls. Thankfully, our children grew up well. Despite his busy schedule, my husband always made time to play with our children. He was like a friend to them. Whenever he found time, he would take us to museums, experiential places, newly built shopping malls, valleys, and beaches. Thanks to him, we made many memories. I worked as well, but my workplace was near home, so it was a bit easier for me. My mother lived in the same apartment complex, so she would look after the children when I had to work late. I also frequently met and spent time with my sister's family, who lived just 15 minutes away from home. Some sons-in-law find it uncomfortable to live close to their mother-in-law's house, but my husband was quite gentle. He thought it would be better for both of us if we lived near my parents after having a child. So we moved to the apartment where my parents lived. My job involved dealing with people and was funded by the country's taxes, so I had to be very meticulous, which made me quite edgy throughout the day. But when I came home and saw our children's playful antics, it helped me unwind and relieve the day's stress. We lived an ordinary life, just like everyone else, until one day, we noticed that my husband's health was deteriorating. He suddenly lost weight and was diagnosed with cancer. I left our children with my parents and devoted myself to nursing my husband, but he passed away in less than a year. Fortunately, we had good insurance, so we received a decent amount of insurance money. Without my husband, I felt extremely empty, but living with my busy son helped me gradually forget. I had to feed and live with my children somehow. The boss knew about my husband's death and called me back to work. It was difficult to work for a while, but with his encouragement, I was able to work gratefully. Before going to bed, I started reading posts on a local online cave and found that there were quite a few people who had gone through painful experiences like me. I started meeting with these people and gradually let go of my pain. Of course, religion played a part as well. My family regained strength and stood up again. The workplace I mentioned is operated with the country's money. However, a clerical worker made a mistake, which led to an investigation. As a result, it was found that he had been overcharging for a long time, and the rumor spread that our business had mishandled its work, so we had to close it down. As a result of that incident, I found myself unemployed. Of course, I was able to get by for a few months with the unemployment benefits I received due to the closure of the business. But with the cost of my children's education, I had to find a new job. That's when I came across a job advertisement in a local community. The job was to inspect knit products, and the factory was about a 10-minute drive from my home. I had always worked in my field of study, in an office, but I had never worked in a factory. That was my first time setting foot in a factory. I was interviewed by a woman who appeared to be about my age. She introduced herself as the team leader of the factory. She said that the boss was always on the move and wouldn't be around much. She said that while experienced people are good at this job, those who are willing to learn and pay attention to detail often find it enjoyable. She said it's not a headache. You can listen to whatever you want with your earphones in, and all you have to do is meet your daily quota. I thought it would be fun once I got used to it. She asked me to give an answer on the spot if I could, so I said I would start working from the following Monday. Then I started going to the factory. I greeted my coworkers and started working. At noon, we went to a nearby restaurant for lunch, and we didn't have to pay. They had a contract with the restaurant and would settle the bill later. We had coffee until 1 o'clock, chatted with the coworkers, and then got back to work. At 3 o'clock, they told us to stop working. I asked the person sitting next to me what was going on, and she said it was snack time. There was a young male worker in the factory who was quite handsome. I asked a coworker about him, and she said he was the boss' son. His name was Theron, and he was studying business after graduating from college. Theron was very kind, giving out snacks to the older women and greeting them. The same was true for the other workers. The workers were mostly middle-aged women in their 40s and 50s, and there was even an older sister who seemed to be in her late 60s. Working in a factory involves repetitive tasks, so my shoulders and arms hurt. I thought I might develop an occupational disease from doing this work, but a coworker told me, "You'll get used to this job too. At first, you'll have to go to the hospital for physical therapy. But later, it won't hurt because your body gets used to it. Think of it as a passing phase." She was right. For the first few weeks after I started working, I went to the hospital after work. How could a housewife not use her arm as advised? I had to prepare meals for my children at home, do laundry, wash dishes, tidy up. I had no time to rest. My daughter, feeling sorry for me working in a factory, created a steam towel for me. She soaked a washcloth in water, put it in a plastic bag, and microwaved it for a minute. Keeping it on the sore parts helped relax the tense muscles. My body was tired, but it was good. Not having to deal with paperwork and getting to know the neighborhood ladies. I had fun going to work. To introduce myself, I've been complimented for my looks since I was young, which is a bit embarrassing to admit. I'm of average height, and despite being a mom of 2, I've been blessed with a body that doesn't easily gain weight. I'm really grateful for that. While others spend a lot of money to lose weight, I've never had to diet in my life. Even by my own standards, I thought I was the most attractive among those who worked in the knit factory. In fact, I was going to the factory every day looking forward to seeing Theron. Every day, Theron would kindly say, "You're working hard. Enjoy your snack," and bring new snacks. It's strange how the heart works. I started to have feelings for Theron, who was only a few years older than my son. I asked a coworker if Theron had a girlfriend, and she said she didn't know for sure, but probably not. I never expected to harbor such strange feelings. I started dressing up every day to look good for Theron. I should have worn comfortable clothes for work, but I put up with the discomfort and wore tight-fitting clothes. As I mentioned earlier, I was confident about my body. I felt Theron give me an extra glance as he gave me a snack and left. I started working at the beginning of the month, and it was now the end of the month. The factory paid wages at the end of every month, and I found out that they had a company dinner on the last day of the month. That's when I first met the boss, who I thought looked a lot like Theron. The company dinner was really fun. The boss said that our factories' products were getting a good reputation and were going to be exported to 10 countries. He said we should prepare for more work in the future. And as soon as he said, "Thanks to your hard work, I've doubled this month's salary," everyone cheered. The boss seemed to be a generous and kind person. Eating tortillas with beer made me feel even better. That day, we went to a karaoke bar for the second round. The boss said he should leave early on days like this, and the remaining employees had a great time. Then something exciting happened. Theron grabbed the microphone and started singing a ballad. And he was a good singer. He was handsome and a good singer, so I started to fall for him. I was drunk, and the lyrics of the song were sad, so I started crying. Theron took my hand while he was singing, and we sang together. The older women were shouting, "Go for it, go for it." My heart was pounding at the thought of wanting to work things out with Theron, just like the older women suggested. After leaving the karaoke bar, the employees hurried home, and I was on my way home as well. I was the only one heading in the direction of my house when I heard, "Alicia, wait a minute." When I turned around, it was Theron. He said he had something to say and asked if we could talk somewhere nearby. We didn't want to go back into a bar, so we went to a playground in a nearby apartment complex. Theron asked if I was okay now. I had been crying earlier. I told him I had a moment of sorrow thinking about my late husband. Theron said he didn't know I had such pain and held my hand. His hand was warm. That's when I realized that age doesn't matter in love. I was attracted to Theron, and when Theron held my hand first, I felt like I was flying. Theron said he had something to tell me, but he wanted to do it after he was sober. That night, I couldn't sleep a wink. It wasn't because Theron was the boss's son. I felt him as a man because of his caring and kind impression, and I wanted to meet him if I had the chance. The next morning, just before I went to work, I received a text message. He said he wanted to talk after work and asked if I could come to Starbucks. I hesitated for a moment, then replied, "Of course, I can." I don't know where the energy came from as I hadn't slept and had been working all day. I worked lightly and met Theron. Theron said he wanted to meet with me. From that day on, we exchanged looks without the employees knowing. The number of dates increased, and we had a good time at night. Theron even said this one day. He said there's an empty room inside the factory office. It's a space to rest when tired from work. But the employees don't know about that room. After all the older women leave work, we can rest together in that room. Theron, who was coming on strongly, was so cute that I spent some good times in his room using overtime as an excuse. I've been seeing Theron for over a year. Theron and I love each other very much. The boss even raised my allowance, so I'm earning more than I did at my previous job. The boss says he will introduce me to his father when he gets a chance, but I have no intention of hindering the path of a young man or giving him a burden. It's amazing in itself that I have a boyfriend at this age. I'm quite satisfied with my situation. If Theron, who understands a widow's heart, is in a hurry, I'm thinking of rushing to him.
Welcome to my channel, where every story comes to life. Dive into captivating narratives that spark your imagination. Let's start today. New narrative story. Tom Harris, 34, a hard-working mechanic from Melbourne, devoted to raising his daughter after his ex-wife left. Emily Harris, 32, Tom's ex-wife, a marketing executive who abandoned her family in pursuit of a different life. Ava Harris, 11. Tom and Emily's daughter, bright and curious, unaware of her mother's past until now. Liam Smith, 36. Emily's new boyfriend, a compassionate man who values family and insists on honesty. The sun was setting over the bustling city of Melbourne, casting an orange glow over the skyline. Tom Harris, a dedicated mechanic, stood in the driveway of his modest home, cradling his 1-year-old daughter, Ava. The gentle hum of the city around him was a stark contrast to the turmoil inside his heart. Just days before, Emily, his wife and Ava's mother, had walked out the door, leaving behind nothing but a hastily written note that shattered Tom's world. "I need to find myself. I can't do this anymore." Tom's heart raced as he replayed the moment in his mind. They had shared dreams, plans for their future, and now it all felt like a cruel joke. He looked down at Ava, her big blue eyes gazing back at him with innocence. She had no idea of the storm that had just struck their little family. As tears welled in his eyes, Tom vowed silently to protect her at all costs. The first year without Emily was a whirlwind of sleepless nights and endless responsibilities. Tom juggled his job at the local garage and the demands of parenthood, navigating the complexities of being a single father. He often found solace in the warmth of Ava's small frame as she curled up next to him on the couch, her laughter echoing in the silence of their home. Tom's days were filled with fixing cars and managing the workshop, but his nights were dedicated to Ava. He read her bedtime stories, played dress-up, and comforted her when she had bad dreams. With each passing day, their bond grew stronger, but the void left by Emily loomed large. "Why doesn't Mummy come home?" Ava asked one night, her small voice tinged with confusion. Tom's heart broke anew as he searched for the right words. "Mummy is on an adventure, sweetheart," he said gently, brushing her hair back from her forehead. "But you have me, and I'll always be here for you." Ava's eyes sparkled with trust, and in that moment, Tom knew he would do whatever it took to shield her from the hurt. As the years rolled on, Tom's garage became not just a workplace but a sanctuary. He poured his heart into his craft, and his reputation as a skilled mechanic grew. His days were filled with grease and engines, but he always found time to teach Ava the basics of fixing a car. One Saturday afternoon, he set up a makeshift workbench in the backyard, complete with tools he had carefully collected over the years. Ava, now 6, wore a miniature tool belt and a pair of goggles that were too big for her face. "Today, we're going to change the oil, just like a real mechanic," Tom announced, grinning. Ava giggled, her enthusiasm infectious. Together they worked side by side, a perfect team. "Look, Dad, I did it!" she exclaimed, wiping her hands on her overalls after successfully loosening a bolt. Tom beamed with pride. In moments like this, he felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. Fast forward 5 years. Ava was now 11, a bright and curious girl with an infectious laugh. Tom was still navigating life as a single parent, filled with challenges, but also incredible joy. One evening, while fixing a car, his phone buzzed with an unexpected message. The name lit up the screen. Emily. His heart raced as he opened the message. "Can we talk?" "It's urgent." Tom's stomach churned. It had been a decade since she left, and he had thought he was finally free of the ghosts of their past. He felt anger surge within him, but also a flicker of curiosity. What could she possibly want after all this time? After a restless night, Tom decided to meet her. He chose a cafe that held memories of happier times, a place where they had shared dreams over cups of coffee. As Tom entered the cafe, he spotted Emily at a corner table, nervously fidgeting with her coffee cup. She looked different, stylish and polished, but her eyes reflected a hint of regret. He approached cautiously, heart pounding. "Emily," he said, his voice steady but laced with tension. She looked up, and for a moment, the years melted away. But then reality set in. "Tom, thank you for meeting me," she began, her voice shaky. "I know it's been a long time." "Long time doesn't even begin to cover it," he shot back, anger bubbling just beneath the surface. "You left us. You abandoned your family." "I know, and I'm sorry," she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I was young and scared. I thought I could just move on. I was young and scared. I thought I could just move on." "Move on?" Tom's voice rose. "You moved on while I raised our daughter alone." The conversation spiraled, filled with emotions that had been bottled up for years. Emily finally gathered her courage. "I'm here because of Liam. He found out about Ava and he wants to meet her." Tom's jaw tightened. "Why? So you can play the role of the mother you abandoned?" Emily looked pained but resolute. "I want to make amends. I want to know her, to be part of her life." Tom's heart ached for Ava. He had protected her from the hurt of Emily's absence, but now she was old enough to start asking questions. "I need time to think," Tom replied, standing up. "This isn't something you can just waltz back into." As he left the cafe, his mind raced with conflicting thoughts. Could he really allow Emily back into their lives after everything? That night, Tom faced the difficult task of telling Ava. Sitting on her bed, he felt a knot form in his stomach. "Ava, I need to talk to you about something important," he began, his voice steady. "What is it, Dad?" she asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Your mom, Emily, she wants to meet you." Ava's eyes lit up, a mix of excitement and confusion. "Really? I want to meet her." Tom's heart sank. "But you don't understand. She left us, Ava. She chose to walk away." "But I want to know her," Ava insisted, her voice soft but determined. "Maybe she's changed." Tom wrestled with his emotions. He saw the hope in his daughter's eyes and knew he had to consider her feelings. After days of sleepless nights, he finally decided to allow a meeting, albeit cautiously. Days turned into weeks as Tom prepared for the meeting. He chose a park where Ava could feel safe and relaxed. The morning of the meeting, he watched as Ava bounced with excitement, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing a new dress. "Do I look okay, Dad?" she asked, twirling around. Tom couldn't help but smile. "You look perfect, sweetheart." As they arrived at the park, Tom felt a mix of anticipation and dread. Emily was already there, looking nervous, her hands fidgeting with a bouquet of flowers. "Hi, I'm Emily," she said softly as Ava approached. "Hi," Ava replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The three of them sat on a bench, the air thick with tension. "I've missed so much of your life, Ava," Emily began, her voice trembling. "And I'm really sorry." Ava tilted her head, studying her mother. "Why did you leave?" Tom held his breath, knowing this moment would define everything. Emily took a deep breath. "I was lost. I didn't know how to be a mother. I thought it was better for you both if I left." The months that followed were a delicate balancing act. Emily slowly began to spend more time with Ava, attending school events and joining them for weekend outings. Tom watched from the sidelines, torn between anger and the desire to see Ava happy. One Saturday, they visited the zoo. Tom kept a close eye on Emily as she interacted with Ava, sharing laughter over silly animal antics. For a moment, he felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this could work. "Look, Dad, I want to feed the giraffes," Ava exclaimed, tugging at Tom's hand. As they approached the giraffe enclosure, Tom noticed Emily watching Ava with a mix of admiration and longing. "You're doing great, Ava," she said, her voice warm. "Thanks, Mum." Ava beamed. Tom felt a pang of jealousy, but he also saw Ava thriving. It was a complicated web of emotions, but he was determined to keep his daughter's best interests at heart. Final showdown. As their relationship grew, so did Tom's discomfort. One evening, Emily approached Tom at the workshop, her face set with determination. "I want to be a real part of Ava's life," she declared, her eyes searching his. "I've changed, and I'm ready to take responsibility." Tom felt the weight of her words, but couldn't shake the memories of betrayal. "It's not that simple, Emily. You can't just walk back in and expect everything to be fine." "I know I messed up, but I want to make it right," she pleaded. Tom's anger flared. "You've already hurt her once. I won't let that happen again." Emily's shoulders slumped, but she didn't give up. "I'm not asking for a free pass. I'm willing to earn your trust one step at a time." After days of reflection, Tom realized that he couldn't shield Ava from the possibility of reconciliation. They agreed on boundaries. Emily would see Ava regularly, but Tom would remain involved in every step of the process. Slowly, trust began to rebuild. Tom watched as Ava blossomed with Emily's presence, her laughter filling their home. One evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Tom felt a warmth he hadn't experienced in years. "This is nice," Ava said, a smile lighting up her face. "Yeah, it is," Tom replied, glancing at Emily, who met his gaze with gratitude. In that moment, both for himself and for Emily. It was a long road, but they were willing to walk it together. Years later, as Ava prepared for her high school graduation, Tom felt a swell of pride. She had become a confident young woman, ready to take on the world. Emily stood by, a new, supportive presence, and for the first time, Tom felt a sense of peace. "Are you ready, Ava?" Tom asked, his heart swelling with emotion. "Yeah, Dad. I can't believe it's finally here," Ava replied, her eyes sparkling with excitement. As they stepped outside, Tom took a moment to reflect on the journey they had shared. Despite the challenges and heartache, they had forged a new family dynamic, one built on understanding and forgiveness. "Thank you for being here," Tom said to Emily, gratitude in his voice. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," she replied, her eyes filled with sincerity. The graduation ceremony was a whirlwind of emotions. Tom watched as Ava walked across the stage, accepting her diploma. The pride swelling in his chest was overwhelming, and he glanced at Emily, who was beaming with joy. As the ceremony concluded, they gathered for pictures, capturing the moment forever. "Dad, can you believe I did it?" Ava exclaimed, her face flushed with happiness. "I'm so proud of you, Ava. You've worked hard for this," Tom replied, pulling her into a tight embrace. Emily joined them, wrapping her arms around both of them. "This is just the beginning, Ava. I'm so proud of you, too." As they stood together, Tom felt a sense of unity he had never thought possible. They had come through the darkness together, emerging stronger and more resilient. Turning to the camera, Tom smiled. "Thank you for joining us on this journey. Life has its twists and turns, but it's how we navigate them that defines us. If you have any questions about our story or want to share your own experiences, drop a comment below. And don't forget to like and share this story. Until next time. As the screen faded to black, the audience was left reflecting on the complexities of love, loss, and the transformative power of forgiveness and redemption. Tom, Emily, and Ava had not only rebuilt their lives but had also forged an unbreakable bond that would carry them forward into a brighter future.
Many dream of owning their own island, often picturing it in the warm Caribbean or South Pacific. Gananoque, a small town on the St. Lawrence River in Ontario, Canada, is part of the Thousand Islands region where both Canadians and Americans live on these islands. Some have castles, and dollar for dollar, these islands rival any in the world, despite being in the St. Lawrence River instead of the tropics. One popular story about the Thousand Islands involves salad dressing, supposedly invented by a local woman and later given to a New York hotel around 1890. though there's no written proof of this. I used to drive trucks for a living, delivering across the contiguous 48 states and Canada for a medium-sized company with about 100 trucks. Drivers could choose between long hauls, regional routes, or local transport. After a long trip of a week or more, we could opt to stay local for a week to spend time with family or go back on longer trips. Sometimes we could even take our wives on the road. Most trucking companies that operate nationwide and in Canada keep their drivers on the road for weeks, impacting family life. Several professions strain families, with the military being the toughest, followed by trucking and law enforcement. I worked construction during high school summers, so it was natural to start working full-time after graduation. By age 23, I was a skilled carpenter. At 19, I met Julie Simpson, an office clerk at a commercial bakery, and we married at 21. We were happy until the banking and construction industries faced severe losses. Julie and I decided I should try truck driving for better pay, despite the drawback of being away from home. The company offered to pay for my truck driving school if I committed to a year with them. After getting my Class A CDL 3 weeks later, I was accepted and paired with an experienced driving instructor who taught me the ropes of handling loaded trailers weighing 16 to 36 tons. Scheduled for 5 weeks with my instructor, I convinced the safety department I was ready in 4. After a week in the city and another on local roads, everything went smoothly. I arranged for Julie to collect my paycheck on Fridays from the office, which worked well. After 9 months, while finishing up a week of local driving, my dispatcher Shirley offered a good opportunity. I had cargo heading to Vancouver with a return load to Montreal, or rather, to Gananoque. The young company owner, just a few years older than me, had recently bought one of the Thousand Islands, complete with 2 houses. He wanted the main house furnished with handcrafted furniture from Vancouver Island, although the furniture wouldn't be ready for a month. The operations department decided to surprise him with an early delivery. Here's the deal. You can't tell anyone, not even his wife. I'm not saying she'll spill the beans, but since she comes for your paycheck, she might say something to the wrong person. The boss and his wife will be there next weekend around the time you get back. You'll head to Vancouver, get loaded up, and then return. Is this something you'd be interested in? Before I could respond, she interrupted. Remember, whether you accept or not, you can't tell anyone. Do you promise? I accept and promise not to tell anyone, I said. Good. Since you took it and because I like you, have you seen that brand new Peterbilt in the yard? He asked. Of course I saw it, I replied. Well, it's yours. Load your things into it. Your cargo is in trailer 2353. You can leave in the morning. Call me when you get to Vancouver. And be careful, he instructed. I went home and told Julie about my upcoming trip to the West Coast. She didn't mind the good pay, but we both disliked my nearly 2-week absence. To make up for it, we cherished our night together. Lovemaking with Julie was always special. She was always eager for anything. Early in my trucking days, we took unclothed photos so I could take her with me. Whenever I drove to Canada, her photos stayed in a bag on my seat, never checked during the thorough border searches after the first time. Leaving was simple, crossing the border routine with courteous Canadian officials. During the search, Shirley called, "The boss's furniture was ready, brought from the island that day." Unloading and loading took hours. Then I headed back east, fully loaded. Returning via Detroit, the drive to Montreal took about 9 hours. In Kingston, I parked overnight and called Shirley. At 6 a.m., we loaded a barge for the island. The path was straightforward but slow. The forested island led to the guest house, where I unexpectedly found my wife with the boss, her bosom being rubbed with what I assumed was sunscreen. As I approached, I realized it was indeed sunscreen, but she wasn't his wife. She was mine. They were caught off guard as I spoke to them briefly, then turned away without hearing their response. Back at the dock, realizing I was on an island, I noticed several boats moored there. Taking a boat was my only way back. With some basic knowledge from TV and movies, I found keys, started a boat, and hurried back to town, damaging it slightly on arrival. The boat drifted away as I left for Kingston Airport, buying a ticket for a flight to New York. Julie had left one message on my ringing phone. "Please call me back," her message read. I called. "Shirley? Good morning, Scott. Did you succeed?" she asked. "How long, Shirley?" I demanded. "How long for what?" she replied, confused. "How long has he been sleeping with my wife?" I questioned. "What are you talking about? My God, is she there? Is she all right? How long?" Shirley responded, panicked. "About 3 months. Sorry, Scott. His wife had to be there, otherwise I would never have sent you," she admitted. "So you would send me somewhere knowing the boss was having lovemaking with my wife?" "Who else knows?" I pressed. "Just Joey and me," she confessed. Thank you, Shirley. Thank you very much, I said sarcastically. Wait, where are you? What are you going to do? Wait, he's on the other line. I'll be right back, she said urgently. Freak you, I muttered, ending the call. Now I understand why she didn't want me to tell Julie about the trip. She would have told Bradley, ruining the surprise, especially the one he just had. It was a small airport, and I could see everything and everyone coming and going. I kept looking to see if she or he would show up, but they didn't. The flight was short. After landing, I rented a car and drove 4 hours home. She wasn't there. I couldn't stop thinking about what I would do. On the drive home, my phone rang again, and she left another message. Scott, if you're home, I'm on my way. Please don't do anything until I arrive and we can talk. We never had lovemaking, Scott. We just fooled around. Please believe me. They never had lovemaking? Jesus Christ. Did she really think I was that stupid? At our apartment, I loaded my pickup truck with everything I wanted, walked over to the terminal, and calmly went to work. Shirley and Joey were there. Neither of them looked at me when they saw it was me. How much money do you owe me, Shirley? I demanded. Scott, she began. Write me a check for everything the company owes me now, I insisted. Sorry, Scott. Mr. Bradley said not to give you anything until he talks to you, she explained. Shirley, you owe me. Thank you very much, I replied curtly. He said you crashed one of his boats, she added. What else did he say? Was he bragging about sleeping with my wife? Did you all have a good laugh at my expense? Julie came here and told you to keep me off the road as long as possible. Write me a check, Shirley, or I'll wreck this whole damn office, I threatened. It took her a couple of minutes to figure out what I was owed. She called accounting and told them to write me a check. I went to the accounting department. They had everything ready for me. I looked at it. I changed my mind. Transfer it to my card, please, I requested. But Scott, direct deposit. They hesitated. Now, please, I insisted. I gave them my card number and they did it. Bradley wouldn't be able to stop the direct deposit payment. Then I went to Bradley's house one day. We had been there on a picnic. My wife was probably there for more than just picnics. Mrs. Bradley opened the door. She looked and acted like she was sick. What can I do for you? She asked. My name is Scott Mann and I used to drive for your husband. This morning I delivered furniture to your island and found your husband massaging my wife's bare bosom with one hand, while the other wandered below the waist. I thought you should know. Have a good day, I said. Wait a minute, mister. What did you say your name was? She asked. Scott Mann, I replied. What is your wife's name? She inquired. Julie Mann, I answered. Did you see this morning? She pressed. With my own eyes, I confirmed. Are you sure? She asked again. Lady, of course I'm sure. Do you really think I would make something like that up about my own wife? I retorted. I walked to my truck and drove off, not knowing where I was going. I headed to my parents' house and quickly brought them up to speed. Mom always had coffee ready and offered me a cup. I took it and soon stretched out on the sofa. I closed my eyes. The next thing I remember, I heard my father's voice. Julie, get off my porch or I'll call the police, he commanded. But I need to talk to Scott, she pleaded. After what you did to him? Dad asked. No way. But he doesn't understand, she protested. Oh, I think he understands perfectly. You slept with his boss for 3 months. What's so hard to understand? Dad responded. But he doesn't know why, she insisted. Of course he knows. You're a traitor, that's why. Now get off my porch, he demanded. She started screaming my name. Scott, talk to me, please, Scott, give me a chance to explain. Scott, Scott. It had been a long day, and soon I fell asleep again. The next morning, I woke up early and walked to my truck. I still didn't know where I was going, but I had to go somewhere. I opened the door to sit down, and Julie was sleeping across the seat. She sat up when she heard the door open. I started to walk away, but she grabbed my hand and pulled me back. Please, Scott, listen to me. I had no choice, she pleaded. You either let someone have lovemaking with you, or you don't, right, Julie? I asked. Everything was wrong, she admitted. So you had lovemaking voluntarily? I stated, not questioned. Scott, just give me a chance, she begged. I repeat, you had lovemaking voluntarily, I reiterated. Okay, I had lovemaking voluntarily, but besides, you lied. We never had lovemaking. We just played around a little, she tried to downplay. God, did you really expect me to believe that? Get out of my truck, I demanded. She didn't budge, so I took her hand and pulled her outside. Furious, I drove off before she could get up. I went to a fast food restaurant for breakfast. I ordered, took the food to a table, and ate. When I finished, I went to the bank and split our money. My phone rang several times, and several people left messages. My former employer, Ernest T. Bradley, left too. Call me and let's talk, or I'll sue you for crashing my boat. And then you'll go to jail for threatening my employees. And don't think I won't do it. That was his first message. Listen, I slept with your wife. Deal with it. This happens every day. She's not the first wife I've spent time with, and she won't be the last. Swallow your pride. Take her back and punish her if necessary. That's what she likes and wants. If you don't, maybe I'll keep doing it. Now get back here and drive my truck home, or I'll report you for theft. Plus, you owe me 3 more months to pay for your truck driving school. That was his second message. God, what an idiot. So he was still in Canada. I called his wife to see if I could meet her instead of just rushing to his house again. She agreed, and I played his messages for her. She had been sick before, but after hearing him, she felt worse. At first, I wasn't sure I believed you, but now I do. I'm going to make his life hell. May I have a copy of this message? Mrs. Bradley asked. We made a copy for her, I noted. What are you going to do with your wife? She inquired. Divorce, of course. I just don't know how to approach it, I replied. It's simple, she said. Find a good lawyer and hire him. It sounded so simple. I left her house and returned to my parents. They also asked what I planned to do. I told them the same thing I told Mrs. Bradley. My father then repeated word for word what she had told me. They convinced me, so I started looking for a lawyer again. I had no idea where to start, so I began with the letter A in the phone book. I got to D before I found my lawyer, David Dennison, and we hit it off right away. His entire family, including himself, were truck drivers until he flipped his car and was paralyzed from the waist down. He graduated from law school in a wheelchair. He was the only member of his family not in the trucking business, but they all knew and respected Ernest T. Bradley. Dennison noted several times Bradley's youth and business acumen. In fact, everyone who knew him respected him. He was famous in society. He sponsored sports teams, arts programs, and donated to every charity that came his way. Dennison flat refused to believe me when I first told him what I had discovered in Canada. He was on Bradley's side, and I was almost ready to leave and find another lawyer. But I decided to play the messages for him. He finally began to believe me. Wow, this will shake up the community if it gets out. How do you want to handle this? Privately or make a big splash? Dennison asked. All I want is to get a divorce as cheaply as possible. From what I understand, this will never make it into the newspapers. The reason for the divorce will be infidelity. If that means it goes all over town, so be it. But there won't be any lies about irreconcilable differences. She cheated, and it will be recorded, I explained. It can be difficult if that message is all you have. Courts today almost require visual evidence, especially when accusing a man of his stature, Dennison cautioned. Well, let's try it, I decided. Fine. We will serve her the documents in the next few days. Do you know where she might be? He asked. Either at work, at the bakery, at home, or in Canada with him, I guess, I replied. Of course, we can't serve documents to her in Canada, so we'll try at home or work, he noted. That works for me. You can contact me by mobile or at my parents', I said. I was tired of living with my parents, so I spent the next few days looking for my own apartment. I found one that wasn't the fanciest or best in town, but it was mine. A week later, Julie was served at work. My father owned a small welding shop. I never had any interest or inclination towards welding, but that started to change. He convinced me to come work for him just to get me out of my apartment. Both he and my mother thought I spent too much time indoors. I thought about working for another transport company, but I wasn't too enthusiastic about it. So I went to the welding shop. My dad had a pickup truck with portable welding equipment, and basically all he did was fix things. Sometimes a client would ask for something special, and my father would prepare it. Julie tried to talk to me several times, but after she was served, everything went through our lawyers. Our first meeting was about a month after she was served. Her lawyer, of course, tried to get the infidelity charge thrown out. I categorically refused. Bradley was named in the divorce petition, and Julie desperately didn't want his name to appear anywhere near the divorce suit for infidelity. This could ruin his reputation in society. He doesn't deserve it, she objected. I exploded. Are you serious? He is a wife-stealing slug and should be exposed to the public. Julie intervened. If you had treated your wife better, he wouldn't have been able to steal her. This led to a quarrel between us, which could only be stopped by placing us in separate rooms. After we cooled down and were back in the same room, she again tried to get me to remove his name. I'm not going to do this, so forget about it. Why are you trying so hard to protect him? Are you planning to marry him? Are you still sleeping with him? FYI, he and I are still dating, so yes, I'm still sleeping with him. Her lawyer simply laid his head on the table and groaned, and without lifting it, he spoke. You just admitted to your husband and 2 bailiffs that you committed infidelity. This is probably the worst thing you could do at this point. I don't care, she said. Then to me, answering your other question, yes, I'm going to marry him as soon as he gets divorced. So you think he loves you? I asked. Certainly. I put my phone on the table and scrolled through his message to her. That's not what he said. He's just playing you. Mr. Dennison chuckled as he pulled an envelope from his briefcase and slid it across the table to Julie. Her lawyer intercepted it, opened it, and reviewed the contents, a note and a series of photos. Julie examined the photos first, then read the note aloud. Mr. Mann, these may help with your divorce. The first 5 were taken on the island 3 weeks ago with his hairdresser's wife. The next 6 were from last week when I was away. He picked up a woman at a bar. It was just another fling, like your wife, the note signed Cynthia revealed. All the photos showed Bradley with the 2 women in various stages of undress or in carnal positions, leaving no doubt about their affair. Julie pushed the photos back and left the room, not to be seen until court, where they split everything: money, jewelry, china, and her clothes. She stayed in their apartment. Bradley's reputation tanked swiftly. His sports teams folded, and Cynthia received half of everything, including their home and half the moving company. He only kept the Canadian island because she didn't want it. He billed my lawyer for truck driving school, claiming breach of contract, met with a colorful response from Mr. Dennison. Cynthia called to disregard it, offering me an operations manager job at a trucking company. Tempting, but refused. Over time, I discovered a knack for metalwork, thanks to Dad's guidance. Dating came and went, rarely lasting. Bradley's business sold, and Cynthia disappeared. He occasionally surfaced, but didn't recognize me from our time together. I found joy welding and crafting metal goods in the shop, like weather vanes and mailbox stands. On a quiet Sunday, Julie visited, seeking conversation. Can we talk? She asked. I've nothing to say. Just listen. She explained. I've no excuse. We had a good life. Money, love, so why Bradley? Partly his lies about you, being away, mistreatment. He said every trucker strays, I believed. Shirley fed it, said Bradley treated me well. Mrs. Bradley supposedly okayed his flings to improve marriage. All lies, but I fell for it. Now I know better. I sat quietly and listened. When I thought she had calmed down, I spoke. Why are you telling me all this now? I don't know. I don't think I ever really wanted to tell you this. At least, not the truth. I didn't want you to know how foolish I was. I always thought I'd come up with a story where it was all your fault, and I came up with a few jokes. But I couldn't bring myself to tell you any of them. This afternoon, driving past your store, I saw you here and stopped. I didn't know what I was going to say, just that I had to say something if you'd let me. But what I said turned out to be the truth. What did you hope to gain from this? I asked. Just for you to know that none of this was your fault. These were all my own selfish desires and the fabricated scenarios he created for me. I also wanted you to know that whether you believe it or not, I never stopped loving you, she replied. That's where I think you're lying. I don't think you can truly love someone and lie or cheat on them. You did both. You even wanted to marry him, if I remember correctly. Are you still seeing him? I challenged. I can't explain it any better than I have already, and I won't try to make you believe me. And no, I'm not with him. I haven't seen him since the day in the lawyer's office when I saw those photographs, she responded. She sat silently for a few more moments, watching me work. I guess I should go, she finally said, standing up. Scott. I looked at her. Is there any way I could forgive you enough to give you another chance? She asked. I shook my head. You know where the door is, I replied. After she left, I reflected on my ex-boss and ex-wife, confirming my thoughts about them. I wondered what would have happened if I hadn't surprised my boss on the island. Would I still be trucking, settling for what was left? I chose to make weather vanes and take the risk of going broke. One day, a flyer for a Renaissance festival arrived. I'd never heard of it before and learned Maryland claims jousting and lacrosse as official sports. Curious, I attended the festival nearby. There I saw vendors selling armor, swords, and more. Inspired, I researched and crafted shields and swords, then sold them at festivals across the country. Teddy Wickoff helped me sell my items, marking the start of a new business. I continued making and selling swords and shields, gaining momentum. During this time, I took on a challenging repair job for Mr. James Jameson's damaged gate. Despite initial doubts, I completed the task with help from his daughter Hannah, who brought me iced tea and kept me company. As we bonded over the project, I developed a keen interest in armor making, pondering its profitability. While dating a woman I met at the library, our relationship ended abruptly. Later, at a cinema, I unexpectedly encountered Hannah with her boyfriend, hearing her voice within minutes of their arrival. "If you touch me there again, I'll cut off your balls." His hand dropped from her shoulder. Irritated, she left, and her boyfriend pleaded for her to return. I followed them. To her credit, she didn't tolerate his behavior. I wasn't close enough to hear, but they were arguing about something. I decided to intervene, something I'd never done before. "Excuse me, Hannah, are you okay?" I asked. She looked at me, taking a moment to recognize me. "No, that guy has more arms than an octopus, and I'm tired of fighting him off. Can you give me a ride home?" "Sure," I agreed. As we headed to my truck, another guy approached. "Hannah, are you okay?" he asked. "Now I am, yes," she replied. "Do you want me to take you home?" he offered. Without even looking at me, she said yes, and they headed to his car without saying goodbye to me, as if I weren't there at all. I stood there watching them drive off, shook my head, and went home. A few days later, I was at her house again. There were some railings along the walkway that needed attention, so Mr. Jameson asked me to return. Hannah saw me and came over to say hello, but didn't mention the movie incident. I was a bit annoyed at being completely ignored at the cinema and wasn't in the mood to chat. She took the hint and left. I returned the next day with spare parts. It was a standard railing, so parts were readily available. As she headed towards the pool, Hannah stopped to chat. I mostly ignored her. I enjoyed our conversations while working on the gate, but after the theater incident, not so much. "Are you mad at me?" she asked. "Do you remember what happened at the movies last week?" I replied. "You mean with the octopus guy?" she clarified. "Yes," I confirmed. "What about it?" she asked. "You asked me to give you a ride home. Do you remember that?" I pressed. "Of course," she answered. "What happened after that?" I inquired. "Nothing. Jimmy showed up and took me home," she said. "And you didn't see anything wrong with that?" I asked. "No. Was there?" she responded, confused. "Not if you didn't see anything." "I guess," I said, grabbing a hammer and started making noise with the metal, hoping she'd take the hint and leave. It didn't make sense, I thought. Yeah, she was getting impatient. "I don't get you," she said. I looked her in the eye. "That's the problem," I stated. I resumed hammering. She got the message and left. The rest of the day was spent finishing the railings. My interest in armor grew, and I researched its construction extensively. I crafted my first piece and felt proud of it. I sent a photo to Teddy to get his opinion. "Stick with shields and swords," he advised, laughing. "You're good at that. Armor requires a lot more work to sell." A few days later, I was at a local bar watching a baseball game when Hannah sat down next to me. "I'm meeting friends for a drink. Want to join us?" she asked. "No thanks. I'm good here," I replied. She got up to leave, but hesitated. She looked at me. "Are you ever going to tell me what I did to make you mad?" "If I have to explain it, I feel sorry for you. Enjoy your drinks," I said. I finished my beer and was about to leave when she returned. "Oh my God, Scott. I didn't mean to ignore you. In the theater, that guy made me so angry I didn't know what I was doing. Please accept my apologies," she pleaded. I assumed someone at her table overheard our conversation and corrected her. "Apologies accepted," I said. She smiled. "Will you join us now?" "Please, let's just have a drink. I owe you at least this," I smiled back. "Sure, thank you." They all drank, and the evening turned out to be enjoyable. Two of them, whose names I don't recall, reminded Hannah of her manners. Throughout the evening, I felt sympathetic towards her. The group eventually dispersed, and we all departed. I left with Ginny. I sat next to her at the table and inquired about Hannah. She informed me they had been friends for a long time. "Look, Scott, I'm not her best friend, but we're close. There's something about you she likes. She regrets how she treated you. She told the whole table that," Ginny explained. "She told you? You have to give her credit for that. Do you have her number?" I asked. "No," Ginny replied. "Give me your phone," I said. I handed it over and she entered Hannah's number. "Give her a call," she suggested. The following week, one morning at the store, Hannah walked in. I assumed she got the address from her father. "Did you have fun last time? I enjoyed it. I like your friends," I said. "That's good. But what about me? Do you like me? I remember you apologized," she replied. "I remember," I acknowledged. "Then why aren't we friends?" she asked. I smiled. "I think we're working on it. An apology doesn't automatically mean friendship. It means you realize you made a mistake and regret it. That's why you apologize. The person may or may not accept it. I accepted yours, but that doesn't mean we'll be best friends. It just means I acknowledge you understand what you did and feel sorry for it, assuming your apology was sincere. It was, she assured. I believe you, I said. Good. So let's go out to dinner, she proposed. I chuckled. Why not? It'll be a good step in building our friendship, she added. All right. When? I asked. How about tonight? She suggested. And so it was. Hannah and I had dinner, and our friendship blossomed. We dated for 2 months before becoming physical engaged. But that was just the beginning. Our relationship thrived, and soon we wanted to spend all our time together. She'd visit the store just to be with me, and we both cherished that time. I could work while she read, and we didn't always need to talk or interact. Just being there for each other was enough. During a late-night conversation in bed, I learned she'd been married briefly. However, she surprised me by revealing Jonah Jameson wasn't her biological father. She and her mother were married for only 7 years. She had an older brother, and their father passed away 2 years after their mother married Jameson. Their father owned a trucking company, and her brother Ernest wanted to take over and manage it. He was 6 years older than Hannah, and many doubted his youthfulness. However, Hannah and her mother agreed to let him try. He proved capable, and the company prospered. I got out of bed, poured us drinks, and returned. Tell me about your brother, I asked. I've told you most of it. The important parts anyway. The gist is the transport company was doing well. So well, he and my ex-sister-in-law bought an island in Canada. Then some woman got her hooks into him, and he ended up divorced, selling the company. Supposedly, this woman's husband started driving for him, thinking they could make money together. She wriggled her way in and seduced him. They set it up so her husband would catch them together on the island. My sister-in-law divorced my brother, took half the company, and they had to sell. What a pair of thieves. I downed my drink in one go. How much did they extort from him? I asked. My brother never told me, but they got something, she replied. Do you remember their names? I inquired. I did, but I forgot, she answered. I decided to be honest with her, though I feared it would end our relationship. So I opted for one last physical encounter. Afterward, I almost convinced myself not to reveal my identity because the lovemaking had been unparalleled. Knowing the truth would likely spell the end for us, especially since I was preparing to leave her house. I dressed, sat on the edge of her bed, and began, "The time has come. Let's revisit the story of your brother's divorce. Was what you told me the official version or his perspective?" I asked. He told me, so I took it as official. Why do you ask? She replied. Because everything happened completely differently, I said. What do you mean? She asked. So I recounted the true events. Halfway through, she abruptly got out of bed, still unclothed, and listened intently. In conclusion, I asserted that Julie and I had merely ended in divorce, not extortion. Her response was terse. You're lying, get out. I'm not lying, this is the truth, I insisted. She hurled a pillow at me. You're lying, get out, and don't return with these lies. I departed, disliking such endings, yet cherishing the memory of our final closeness. Life moved on. I experienced another social lull, unable to find a way out of my rut. One evening, feeling indulgent, I dined at a posh restaurant. After finishing my main course, I scanned the room and spotted Hannah and her brother a few tables away, with a small cake adorned with candles. I signaled for the bill, paid it, then boldly approached their table and sat down. They regarded me like an alien. Her brother spoke first. Are you sure you're at the right table? He asked, clearly not recognizing me. Indeed, and I think it's time you told your sister the truth about your divorce. She knows about it, I said. Who the hell are you? He retorted. But evidently she doesn't know the real truth, so you need to set the record straight, I said firmly. Freak you, he shot back. Scott, what are you doing? She nearly shouted. Get out of here. Miraculously, the waiter appeared. Is everything all right here? He inquired. This guy, Hannah said, pointing at me, sat down uninvited and maltreated my brother. I want him to leave. Certainly, sir, I must ask you to depart, the waiter insisted. I faced Bradley first. You're something else, I said. Just go, Hannah demanded. Leaving, I figured it might be our final meeting. Back in my shop, I focused on my favorite projects, axes and chainmail. The next weekend, a festival awaited where I brought shields, axes, and chainmail samples for Teddy. He got me a vendor pass and introduced me to Diana, dressed in period attire with a revealing gown. Diana, meet Scott, Scott Diana, Teddy said. Scott crafts our pieces and he's got some new ones today. That's what I do, I said, fetching the new items from my truck. Teddy and Diana admired them like treasures. Amid the bustling festival, we shared a meal and enjoyed the lively atmosphere. I wanted to ask about Diana, but the chance never came. Teddy later explained, she and her sister organize festivals nationwide. If you hadn't shown up, she would have. Why didn't you tell me earlier? I would have found a motel, I replied. No chance, they're all booked, he said. The next day, Diana was a hit, and we had a profitable weekend selling out our stock. After the festival, Teddy convinced me to stay another night before heading home. I rushed to craft chainmail upon returning, barely sleeping all weekend. Around 3 a.m., Hannah appeared at my door, intoxicated and with police in tow. Are you Scott Mann? One officer asked. Yes, I replied. Is she your girlfriend? He inquired. I know her, but she's not my girlfriend, I clarified. Are you sure? She insists you're her boyfriend, he pressed. Not even close. Last time I saw her, she called me a liar and kicked me out of her house, I explained. We're taking her with us, he said. Where are you taking her? I asked. To spend the night at the station, he replied. No, don't do that. I'll take care of her, I offered. Are you sure? He questioned. No, but I can't let her spend the night at the station, I affirmed. I helped her inside and settled her on my bed, the only one available. I considered sleeping on the couch, which was preferable to the air mattress in Teddy's tent, but I preferred my own bed. Instead, there was a snoring drunk woman in it. The next morning, I woke up and went to work. I heard nothing from her all day and expected her to still be asleep when I returned home. I was wrong. She was gone and the apartment was spotless. I searched for a note, but found nothing. Despite my efforts, I didn't manage to complete a single new piece of chainmail. Teddy stopped by and picked up shields, swords, and axes I had stashed. We debated hiring help, but qualified metal workers were scarce. We decided on training instead, placing ads in the local newspaper and the festival newsletter. On a Friday evening, I was in the workshop working on inventing a machine to speed up chainmail production. There were a few available on the market, but I believed I could improve upon them. It was late, and I was tired when there was a knock on the door. It was a sober-looking Hannah. Thank you for rescuing me from the police, she said. I nodded. I tried to clean up after her. Everything's okay. She nodded back, at a loss for words, as we stood there in silence. Listen, it's been a long day, and I need to get some sleep, I said. I gently moved past her, closed and locked the door, then headed to my car. Good night, I said. As I was about to get into the car, I heard her voice. You were right. My brother lied. I'm sorry, she admitted. I simply waved over my shoulder, got into the car, and drove home. Armor making fascinated me. After Teddy critiqued my initial attempt, I conducted extensive research and created another suit that served as a template for future pieces. They were labor-intensive, time-consuming, and incredibly challenging, but I relished the challenge. Feeling prepared, I debuted it at the next festival, where Teddy was impressed. While we could have sold it several times over, we chose to showcase it as a sample of my craftsmanship. Visitors admired it, commented, and if interested in purchasing, we discussed customization options. My festival ventures were prosperous and fulfilling. I purchased a trailer to transport my tools and materials, enabling me to move between festivals. Sometimes I worked at a booth, engaging with visitors, while other times I crafted in the private vendor area. One evening between festivals, I conversed with my father and marveled at the unexpected success of Renaissance metalwork. Who would have known so many people were interested in armor and could afford it? These items weren't cheap, I remarked. After the festival season ended, I began dating a girl I met at our local car dealership. I was considering buying a new truck since my dad's welding truck was old. The plan was to outfit my new truck with welding equipment, sell the old one, and possibly upgrade to something newer and bigger. While she was getting her car serviced, I admired a new truck outside the showroom. We struck up a conversation and ended up exchanging phone numbers. A week later, we went on our first date, followed by a second, and so on. One evening after I drove her home, she invited me inside. We had a second drink, and I sat on her sofa. She stood in front of me and started unbuttoning her blouse. Do you mind if I get more comfortable? She asked. Not at all, as long as I get to watch and enjoy, I replied. She grinned. That's the whole idea. I undress while you watch, then you undress while I watch. Then we have lovemaking, hoping it won't end too quickly. It seems like you've planned everything out. Oh, absolutely. As her blouse came off and her skirt was about to follow, I reached for her underwear, but she gently pushed my hands away. Let me handle this. Just watch and enjoy. You do like watching a lady undress, don't you? I'm not sure. I've never really paid attention before, I admitted. She let out a deep, throaty laugh. I hope you're better in bed than you are at lying. Her bra joined her blouse on the floor. You're pretty confident, aren't you? Very, she said. Now it's your turn. I began unbuttoning my shirt. Slow down, Tiger. We have all night. Let me enjoy the show. I slowed down and she licked her lips. I kicked off my shoes, unbuckled my belt, and unzipped my trousers. As I started to pull my pants down, she placed her hands over mine and knelt down, following my pants to the floor. She stopped when she was on her knees, looking up at me. What's next? T-shirt or shorts? She asked. Which do you prefer? The t-shirt. Save the best for last. I removed my t-shirt and tossed it aside. She picked it up and brought it to her nose. I love the scent of men, she murmured. I left around 3 in the morning. The whole drive home, I compared her to Hannah, and the last time we had lovemaking, unable to decide who was better. The relationship lasted a solid 4 months before we broke up. Later that evening, I noticed several missed calls and messages from Hannah. Scott, please call me as soon as you get this message. It doesn't matter what time it is, please, her message read. I took her at her word and dialed. She answered after 2 rings. Hello, Scott, she said. Her voice sounded slightly slurred. I woke you up. I think I dozed off. I tried to stay awake waiting for your call. All right, I'm calling. What's so urgent? I asked. I wanted you to know my brother lied about his divorce. You were right, and I'm sorry. You've already apologized for that. Is there something else? I inquired. Yes. There was a pause. Can we see each other again? I miss you, she confessed. Honestly, there's no way you and I can see each other knowing who your brother is and what he did with my wife. If we got serious, it would inevitably cause problems with him, and I'd always feel uncomfortable. I'm not putting myself through that. I could hear her crying. I knew you'd say that, but I hoped you wouldn't. Goodbye, Scott. The Renaissance festivals were back in full swing. I secured my passes, bought a tent and camping gear, and hit the road. I spent most of my time assisting Teddy at his booth. When not doing that, I worked on creating new items for sale. My armor-making skills had improved significantly during the off-season, and at each festival we sold at least 1 piece. While demand was high, each piece required a substantial amount of time to craft. 2 days after closing one festival, Teddy asked if I could join him at the next one. I agreed, and since he was nearby, he brought his trailer with everything I needed. I loaded up my truck and left my trailer at home, taking his instead. I worked 3 festivals in a row, garnering attention from visitors. I even demonstrated my chainmail machine by the 3rd festival. The next event on my schedule was near Philadelphia and spanned 11 days, making it one of the largest in the country. Unlike others, which ran Thursday to Sunday, this one started on a Thursday, continued through the following weekend, and ended the weekend after. I spent 2 weeks at home preparing materials, primarily focusing on armor. My father became adept at crafting shields, axes, and swords. I worked late into the night. One evening, late into the night, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find a very intoxicated Hannah stumbling into my arms. Is this your girlfriend? One of the 2 police officers accompanying her asked. If it keeps her out of trouble tonight, I guess so. I half-guided, half-carried her to my bedroom and simply dropped her on the bed. I showered, shaved, changed into pajamas, and set out clothes for the next day, anticipating the possibility of her returning in a similar state. The next morning, I checked on Hannah, still asleep. I debated whether to stay and attempt a conversation or simply let it go. That evening, I went to work. Upon returning home, I found the house immaculate. She had even cleaned the kitchen. In the bathroom, my toothbrush and toothpaste were in different places, so I rearranged them. Both were wet, as was the washcloth on the sink. I took a frozen enchilada from the freezer and heated it up for dinner, though I didn't eat much. The following morning, I departed for a festival in Philadelphia, bringing along all my materials for shields and chainmail. My plan was to conduct numerous demonstrations. The first day was incredible, and it only improved from there. On that initial Sunday, a large crowd watched me nearly all day long. By the time the festival closed for the day, Teddy and I were both exhausted. Evenings in the vendor area were always lively, serving as the epicenter of the party scene. There, people cooked, played music, drank, rehearsed sword fights, repaired or tried on armor, tended to horses and physical engaging activities. It wasn't uncommon to stroll past a tent and hear sounds of closeness or see a camper or van gently swaying. After things quieted down, I sat outside my tent and thought how nice it would be to have someone inside to cuddle with. Hannah was probably free, but I couldn't bring myself to call her. Monday's crowds were moderate, but foot traffic remained steady throughout the day. Attendance records weren't broken, but it was bustling enough. In the middle of the day, while demonstrating the painstaking process of assembling chainmail, I glanced up and saw Hannah watching me. I continued my demo, inviting questions from onlookers. None were posed, and the crowd eventually dispersed, leaving Hannah standing there. "Do you enjoy doing this?" she asked. "Yes, I do," I replied. "You're good at it," she said. With that, she turned and melted into the crowd. I didn't see her again until the end of the event. On Wednesday, my parents arrived with more shields and axes. I showed them around, though they didn't seem entirely pleased with what I was doing. I pointed out where the vendors were set up, particularly to my mother, who disapproved of my tent setup. The remainder of the week and the weekend were successful, leaving Teddy and me satisfied upon returning home. I took a day off, during which my father helped me with chainmail work in the shop. As I discussed plans for a larger motorhome and trailer, the door opened and Hannah walked in. "This festival was a blast. A few friends and I are heading to the next one nearby," she said. "We even talked about going in armor." "Sounds like fun," I replied vaguely. "Will you be there?" she asked. "Probably," I answered. My father and I kept working, not making eye contact with her. "Can I come with you?" she inquired. "Not very practical, since I'll be there from Wednesday to Sunday," I said. "No worries. We can get a motel room," she suggested. "Highly unlikely. Those book up months in advance," I explained. "Where do you sleep?" she asked. "In a tent," I replied. "That sounds cozy. Maybe we could share," she proposed. "It's a small tent," I said. "Small ones can be cozy," she said. My father glanced at me, grinned, and excused himself. "Listen," she said, "you'll never forget that my brother had an affair with your wife, so we can't have a serious relationship. But that doesn't mean we can't be friends with benefits, right? We enjoy lovemaking together, don't we?" I hesitated. "So why not use each other? You can date whoever you want, but if you're not getting any action, I can help. What do you say?" I looked at her. "You're amazing, and I've said it before. But the idea of sharing doesn't sit well with me. I can't just have lovemaking with you knowing you might leave for someone else, even if you haven't yet. We both deserve to find real relationships and respect them." She stepped closer, touched my face, and kissed me. "You don't get it. I'm already in a relationship. If you want to date others, go ahead. Just know I'll always be there for whatever you need, whenever you need it. I don't need anyone else. I love you, and I fully intend to honor this arrangement." She kissed me once more and departed. My father must have watched her leave. "What are you going to do about her?" he asked. I kept staring at the door through which she had just exited. "I honestly don't know, Dad. What do you think?" "You've got two choices. Either come to terms with the fact that her brother had an affair with your ex-wife and accept that she may stick around, or leave town and keep a low profile. Maybe it's time to consider what your mother and I discussed." "What's that?" "We'll talk about it when we get home." At the dinner table later, he filled my mother in on Hannah. "So I thought maybe it's time we gave Scott that gift we talked about." "I think you might be right," she said. "What gift are you talking about?" I asked. "I don't like the idea of you sleeping in a tent," my mother said. "We're going to buy you a motorhome," my father announced. Arguing with them seemed pointless, and I actually thought it was a good idea. It took a week to find exactly what I wanted. Since I already had a Class A CDL, I didn't need driving lessons, so I hugged them both, thanked them, and bought a trailer to tow behind it. I set up the trailer so I could work inside if needed, and connected power from the van to the trailer. It was an excellent setup. I focused on crafting armor while my father worked on shields, swords, and axes. We both found immense satisfaction in this type of work. Teddy became envious when he saw my trailer and asked if I had christened it yet. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Have you had lovemaking in it yet?" he clarified. "No," I replied. He grinned. "Do you mind if Diana and I—" I chuckled. "Go right ahead." He texted her, and she arrived in 10 minutes. He took her hand, and off they went. They held hands and laughed when they returned. "We wanted you to be the first to know," he said. "Diana and I are getting married." She hugged me. "It was your van that clinched it," she said. "Thank you." That weekend, I didn't see much of any of them, but my van smelled like perfume and more. Back home for a week, Hannah spotted the van and dropped by. I'd been in a dry spell and knew I could get her into bed, so I gave her a tour and she was suitably impressed. "This is much better than a tent," she remarked. "Yes, indeed," I agreed. "It's got a double bed, doesn't it?" she asked. "Yes, and a sizable closet." "And I bet this shower can fit too." "It probably can," I said. We were in the van's living area when she approached me. "Has it been christened yet?" she coyly inquired. "What do you mean?" I asked, though I knew exactly what she meant. "Has anyone had lovemaking in it yet?" I fibbed. "No, it's brand new." "Well," she almost whispered, "we could do it now or this weekend." Since we were in my parents' yard, now wasn't feasible. "What do you mean this weekend?" I asked. "After the festival ends each evening," she suggested. "We could then." "Sorry, this is Southern Virginia. Even if I said yes, it's too far a drive for you." "You're right," she conceded. "So I'll just come with you." "Did you not hear what I just said?" She started tugging at my shirt, pulling me closer. "Scott, you admitted I'm the best you've ever had, and you're the best I've ever had. Plus, I'm in love with you, and I know you like me more than just a little. We should just have lovemaking whenever we can. Also, I have a dress that would be perfect for the festival. Everyone will love it, especially you." She kissed me softly and tenderly, as if she were in love with me. "I'm leaving here at 5 in the morning on Tuesday. I won't wait for you," I meekly stated. She kissed me again. "You don't have to." And she was right. She unpacked her clothes, stocked the kitchen, and by midnight Monday, she was in the van's bed. As soon as I got behind the wheel Tuesday morning, she came and sat in the passenger seat wearing only a robe. I knew because she glared at me every time I glanced her way. She met Diana, and both wore low-cut dresses that accentuated their curves. I couldn't wait for the workday to end. At closing time, Teddy and I shut down the booth. Diana and Hannah were cooking dinner in the van upon our arrival. I'd never tasted Hannah's cooking, but it was delicious. After Teddy and Diana left, Hannah asked if I wanted to shower with her. There was enough space for two, and from there we moved to the bed. That night marked the beginning of many nights and days spent enjoying each other in that van. This was also 3 years ago. Initially, her family tried to convince her that I only let her travel with me to spite her brother. He had convinced them that Julie and I were the cause of his divorce, not him. Obviously, none of them had been in court to see the truth, and like Hannah, they believed him. Hannah provided them copies of my divorce decree and her ex-sister-in-law's statements. He stayed in town and was responsible for a couple more divorces before deciding that the other side of the country would be better for his health. Hannah now has several new dresses for festivals. They don't highlight her belly as much. She never said she wanted to be a wife before becoming a mother, but I know it's on her mind. It's on my mind, too. When my wife and I arrived at the Halloween party, it was already lively. It was hard not to notice her fit physique showcased by her tight, jet black Catwoman outfit. Despite being a mom of two, Alicia looks stunning. Sometimes I forget just how attractive she is. I, on the other hand, was dressed as a pirate. Hot? Not really. But not too shabby either. Alicia gave me a quick kiss on the cheek before mingling with other guests, while I made my way to the drinks area where my friends were engaged in a heated debate. As I approached, I realized they were arguing over the age-old question, Hulk or Superman? It struck me as a bit silly considering the intellect in the room. Superman was obviously the superior choice. Nevertheless, I decided to join the debate, drawing from my childhood spent immersed in Marvel and DC comics. Confident in my expertise, I hoped to settle the matter once and for all. However, my arguments only fueled the debate further, turning the conversation into chaos. But that's what happens when you mix beer with grown men. Eventually, we all agreed to table the discussion, opting instead to enjoy the abundance of beer and fun. Knowing Alicia wouldn't want to leave anytime soon, I planned to stay relatively sober. She was already having a great time chatting with her best friend Susie, who was also dressed as Catwoman. Alicia and Susie had been inseparable since middle school, despite being almost polar opposites in personality. They shared the same upbringing, often jokingly speculating about being switched at birth. However, they both detested that joke. Susie was married to Dominic, who was quite different from me in many ways. While I managed restaurants for a living, Dominic worked with his hands. Though I wasn't as active in the gym as I used to be, I still maintained a decent level of fitness from my boxing days in college. Dominic, however, works at a nearby factory. While I'm unsure of his specific role, I know it entails heavy lifting for 8 to 10 hours daily. He's practically a gym rat, resulting in a muscular physique. Unlike my neat short hair, his is long and tied back in a ponytail, complemented by a beard giving him an Aztec warrior vibe. If Dominic resembles Drogo from Game of Thrones, I'm more akin to Don Draper from Mad Men. Though I never truly warmed up to him, I didn't dislike him either. Our connection was merely through Susie, my wife's best friend, so our interactions were sporadic and never extended beyond that. And tonight was no exception. Sporting a Tarzan costume in chilly weather struck me as insensitive. I couldn't help but perceive it as an idiot move, reflecting his tendency for such actions. Despite his flirtatious behavior, which often bordered on inappropriate, the women, including Alicia, seemed to find it more amusing than offensive. This bothered me, especially considering Susie's apparent indifference. While she occasionally playfully chided him, there was no real reprimand, suggesting she took pride in his ability to attract attention. As the night progressed and Dominic's inhibitions lowered with drinks consumption, his flirtatiousness became more pronounced, regardless of the women's marital status. Though some husbands may have been angered by his advances, no one reacted, perhaps out of fear, intoxication, or a desire to avoid confrontation. However, I remained vigilant, ready to intervene if he crossed a line with Alicia. Sensing my unease, she approached me. "Are you enjoying yourself, Greg?" she shouted over the music. I nodded and took a sip of beer, observing her move to the music. Standing beside me, her attention shifted to Tarzan, silently appraising his physique. Unintentionally, I felt a surge of jealousy as I sensed her desire. It bothered me. "Who dresses as Tarzan in this weather?" Alicia snapped back to reality and faced me. "You know Dominic, sweetheart, always craving the spotlight." I chuckled, but the taste of my beer suddenly soured. Alicia noticed my shift in mood. "Are you jealous?" she asked. "Jealous of him? I don't need to strip down to get attention," I replied, my tone defensive. Alicia laughed it off. "Of course not, honey," she said, turning her attention back to him. As the night progressed and more drinks flowed, inhibitions waned. Dominic and his loincloth became less of a focus as I mingled with my genuine friends. It wasn't until later that I noticed Dominic making advances towards Alicia. Searching for her, I found them in the kitchen, engaged in a carnal conversation. My jealousy flared, and Dominic retreated upon seeing me. Alicia, sensing the tension, greeted me with forced warmth. "Hi, darling, I was just looking for you," she hurriedly said. "In the same place all night, Alicia. What were you two talking about?" "You looked awfully cozy," I asked, my tone accusatory. She tried to dismiss it. "Nothing happened, Greg. Dominic was just being his usual flirty self," she assured, but my unease lingered. "I'm just a bit tipsy, honey. Don't worry," she said, patting my cheek before leaving. For the rest of the evening, Dominic and Alicia kept their distance, exchanging only secretive glances. It was enough to unsettle me. I needed a break. The beer was kicking in, so I needed a bathroom break. Afterward, I bumped into Dominic as if he'd trailed me. "Got a problem, Greg?" he slurred, his gaze menacing. "What?" I felt the surrealness of the moment. He accused me of looking down on him due to my wealth, inciting superiority. It puzzled me. "You're drunk, Dominic. Go home before you say something you'll regret," I said, moving past him. "Regret what? Like sleeping with your pretty wife?" he jabbed, grabbing my attention. I confronted him, warning him to keep my wife out of his twisted thoughts. He smirked, dismissing them as memories, not fantasies. His words struck me like thunder, ending the conversation. "You're full of it," I retorted, less certain now. Then he made crude remarks about Alicia, crossing a line. Enraged, I struck him, the impact echoing through the drywall. Descending the stairs, I found Alicia, her tear-filled eyes confirming Dominic's claims. Panic ensued as Dominic lay unconscious. Amid the chaos, Alicia approached me, her question frozen on her lips. A glance told her I knew. Her teary eyes confirmed Dominic's words. "Call emergency! Dominic's unconscious!" she cried. Screams echoed from above, but I stood there, looking at Alicia, searching for the woman I married. Honestly, I didn't care about Dominic's fate at that moment. "What the hell did you do to my husband?" A scream pierced the air behind me, followed by fists punching my back. I dodged Susie's swings and someone pulled her away. "Greg!" "What the hell?" Richard, the party host, questioned, noticing the chaos. Ignoring him, I faced Susie. "Did you know your husband slept with Alicia?" Her silence spoke volumes, confirming her knowledge without anger or denial. She just looked at me as if she knew everything. Alicia's hand rested gently on my shoulder. "Greg, we need to talk, but not here. she said softly. I turned to her, unleashing a surge of rage unlike any I'd felt before. It was so intense, tears welled in my eyes, a release of emotion preventing me from exploding. "He woke up!" a shout echoed from above. Susie hurried back upstairs. My anger began to fade as the gravity of the situation sank in. What if I had eliminated Dominic in a moment of anger? I could face lifelong consequences, even assault charges, jeopardizing my hard-earned career over a drunken mistake. The same drunken mistake who slept with my wife. "Greg, come on, honey. Let's get out of here. We need to talk," Alicia pleaded. "Us? No, Alicia. You're going home with your boyfriend and his wife. I'm leaving," I retorted, heading for the front door. Alicia grabbed me in desperation. "Greg, you can't leave me here. We're going home and we're going to talk. Do you hear me? You're not leaving me behind," she cried, her face streaked with tears, a mix of fury and sadness. It made no sense what she was angry about. "I can't handle this, Alicia. Don't go home. I could end up in jail for assault. I don't want to add domestic violence to the mix." "Damn you, Greg. Damn you. Want to punch me? Go ahead, coward. At least you'll acknowledge me. Damn. It'd be the first time you've touched me in weeks." She jabbed her finger into my chest as her anger escalated, leaving me puzzled by its intensity. She was the one in the wrong, yet she was furious. "Is that it? Because I don't cuddle you every night? Is that your lame excuse? Is that why you cheated with this idiot?" She didn't respond verbally. Her defiant glare spoke volumes. "Just so you know, Alicia, I earn a living. I don't have a husband to pay my bills. Maybe if you had a job, you'd understand what it's like to come home exhausted." Suddenly, I remembered our audience, hanging on every word like they were watching a movie. Alicia was mocking me. "Poor Greg, too tired for his wife, yet finds time for adult movies. Maybe if you paid attention to your wife instead of silicone Barbie dolls online, she wouldn't confide in her friend about feeling neglected." Alicia's voice crescendoed, fists clenched, tears streaming down her face, a mix of pain and fury. It was the ultimate humiliation. I had no witty retort or comeback. Speechless, I faced the judgmental stares of our friends and neighbors, shock, disgust, sympathy, and perhaps a hint of entertainment. I had to leave. Alicia's cries of despair echoed until I started the car and drove off into the night. This story, based on real events, is not from Greg's perspective, but mine, Richard, the party host. Yes, I have a hole the size of Dominic's next to my daughter's room. Writing from Greg's viewpoint allowed readers to feel his anger and humiliation. My wife and I discussed it extensively. It's like watching a train wreck. You can't look away. Susie's lack of anger when Greg disclosed Alicia's affair with Dominic indicated she was already aware. Was it a ménage à trois or another scenario? Frankly, a ménage à trois involving them would rival any adult movie. How long had this been going on? I also noticed the exchanged looks between Alicia and Dominic at the party, suggesting something more. Maybe I'm overanalyzing, but maybe not. It was evident Greg was neglecting Alicia carnally, perhaps in other aspects too. Was this an excuse for her infidelity? I doubt it. Does it explain why she cheated? Certainly. Women whose advances are consistently rebuffed may be more tempted to have an affair, especially if the husband shows interest in other women or watches adult movies, which can be seen as a form of betrayal. By the way, Alicia is incredibly attractive in real life. In my opinion, any man would find her irresistible. But this reinforces the saying that for every beautiful woman, there's a man tired of having lovemaking with her. The crucial question is, what happens next? Currently, the four of them are keeping silent about the situation, but it's only a matter of time before it comes out. While this story is based on true events, I didn't witness everything and had to take creative liberties, especially with Greg's inner thoughts. I sympathize with him and the tough choices he faces. Alicia treated him unfairly, regardless of her reasons. I'm uncertain whether reconciliation or divorce is the best path. Full disclosure, I'm somewhat biased, as Greg is a friend of mine. And about Superman and the Hulk, I side with Greg. Superman's powers like thermal vision, flight, and super speed would easily defeat the Hulk, unless there's kryptonite involved. But that's beside the point. "Mr. Kirkson, they're calling you on line 1. "Who is it, Betty? Mr. Ford is calling for you, sir." Greg called me. I've been trying to reach him since the Halloween party incident. Until now, he, his wife, and their lovers remained silent. But there have been so many questions. How could something like this not happen? The public showdown was so dramatic, with elements of lovemaking, violence, and betrayal. And the epic confrontation between David and Goliath, except this time, Goliath had a glass jaw and wrote a check his drunk self couldn't cash. and David cashed it out of genuine hatred. Patch him through, Betty. Sir, he seems a bit upset. Well, yes, his wife did publicly humiliate him. If he weren't upset, I'd be concerned. Thank you, Betty. I'll handle it. I awaited the click indicating I was connected to Greg. Hey, Greg, it's Richard. I've been trying to reach you since I couldn't bring myself to say these words out loud. Ever since I found out about my wife sleeping with that moron. Yeah, I needed some time to process everything, Greg replied, his voice still carrying the simmering anger beneath his composed tone. Even over the phone, his emotions were palpable. So, do you want to talk about it? I asked, hearing a chuckle from him on the other end, tinged with bitterness. It almost sounded like a snort. Why would I want to talk to you, Richard? Huh, buddy? So you can broadcast it online? Does your little story need a sequel? Are people dying to know what happened next to the guy who couldn't satisfy his wife? Can't your eager fans just wait to see how my damn life unfolds? Fine. He had read my narrative. Now, not only was he furious at his cheating wife, her deceitful friend, and her caveman lover, but he was also angry with me. Fantastic. Greg and I were high school buddies. He played baseball, I played football. Despite losing touch after school, him off to college, me joining the Air Force, we reconnected when I returned to our hometown years later. He'd landed a management job at Olive Garden. I teased him about wasting his college degree, but he persisted and quickly climbed the ranks, eventually becoming a district manager overseeing multiple restaurants, earning almost as much as me. Now, my dear friend was seething at me. Not good, Greg. Usually I'd crack a joke to diffuse tension, but in this case, it'd only make things worse. I especially liked the ending, I began, but he cut me off. I had no choice but to shut up and listen. You know, where I tucked my tail between my legs and ran off like a coward. Nice touch. His words dripped with sarcasm, leaving me feeling like a terrible friend, utterly defenseless. Greg, where are you? We need to talk, I urged. You know what's funny, Richard? I've suddenly become quite the popular guy these days, more so than ever before. Seems like everyone wants a chat with me. Must be my charming personality, he quipped, his voice slurring slightly. I could hear the clinks of liquid pouring into a glass. Greg, are you drunk? I asked, concerned. No, Richard, I was drunk an hour ago. Can't tell you who I am now, he retorted sarcastically. All right, I admit it, I was a lousy friend, but I'm here to make it right. Where are you, Greg? I said, hastily grabbing my coat and keys, momentarily forgetting my work obligations. Screw you, Richard. Not telling you where I am. Don't you dare show up at this bar. I'll mess you up if you do, he warned before the line went dead. But I didn't need him to tell me. I knew exactly where he was. There were only a handful of bars in town worth going to, and Greg had his favorite at Moe's, partly because he had a thing for the cute bartender there. She was the type who could flirt and seem unattainable at the same time, which only added to her allure. Yet, despite her charm, she wasn't busy when I walked in. My heart sank seeing Greg alone at the bar, the sole patron in the place. Checking my watch, I realized it was just past noon. Karen, the bartender, greeted me with a wave, her eyes showing concern. Does this handsome guy belong to you? She teased, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. I nodded subtly, gesturing for her to give us some privacy with a tilt of my head towards Greg. It was all I managed before his fist connected with my face, sending me reeling and seeing stars. No wonder Dominic ended up in bad shape. Before I knew it, I was on the floor, wiping blood from my lip as Greg glared down at me. Eventually, he shook his head and returned to the bar stool. I picked myself up, signaling to Karen to keep quiet as I made my way over to Greg before he noticed me again. She stood before us, eyes wide as saucers. As she started to approach, I silently waved and nodded, signaling that it was all right. In response, she nodded back and resumed clearing tables. Now that that's settled, can we talk? I asked, mustering up courage as I sat down beside him. He took another sip of his beer and shook his head. Off the record? He quipped sarcastically. I chuckled inwardly. At least his sense of humor was intact. Anyway, you really hit a nerve there, he said with disdain. How's your relationship with your mom? You've met her, right? Yeah. I still remember her frisking me to make sure I didn't bring any forbidden stuff into her house. We laughed about it later, Greg recounted, taking another sip before meeting my gaze. For God's sake, Richard. It was bad enough going through that, then reading about it and knowing all my friends knew it was me. Greg, I just penned it down. I never meant to embarrass you. And besides, no one will even know it's you. I tried to reassure both him and myself. 2 cats, Tarzan, and a pirate. Plus the pirate who tossed Tarzan into the wall. How many damn Halloween parties do you think that's happened at? Most of them are the same. Greg looked like he wanted to punch me again. You find this funny? Okay, humor was definitely not the way to go. You're right, Greg. I was an idiot. I genuinely apologize for putting you in that spot. Well, I'm not sorry for punching you, he retorted. I rubbed my chin and chuckled. You still punch like a girl. No wonder you always got your backside kicked in boxing. That seemed to break the tension, and it continued to thaw. I managed to coax him away from Moe's and into my car. Karen shot me a grateful look and hugged me as we left. Take care of him, Richard. He's going through a lot, she said. My jaw was throbbing and beginning to swell, but I got Greg out of there, and that was what mattered most. The moment I secured him into my passenger seat, he drifted off, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Instead of heading to his mom's, I drove him to my place. Along the way, I called another friend, John. How's it going, Richie Rich? He greeted me cheerfully as he answered the phone. John was one of those guys who still acted like he was in his 20s. A great guy, though quite immature. I emphasize very, since most guys are at least a little immature. He's the one who sparked the whole Hulk versus Superman debate, always the life of the party. However, none of the wives really want their husbands to be under his influence. He had a knack for bringing out the teenage troublemaker in his friends. But we all love him. John, I need your hand. I found Greg at Moe's. Might need some help getting him into my place and settled in bed. He's out cold. Damn. Glad you tracked him down. Been looking for him all week. After what that idiot did to him, it's a miracle he didn't do something drastic. John parked his Mustang behind my Tahoe in my driveway, and together we tackled the task of moving 200 pounds of dead weight onto the couch in my basement. Not an easy feat. After chatting for a bit, he headed out with the promise that I'd keep him updated. Being home early meant I had the house all to myself, which was a rarity. So rare, in fact, that I found myself at a loss for what to do. Didn't want to step out in case Greg woke up disoriented. So I fired up the George Foreman grill for steak and baked some potatoes. Then I flipped through my cable sports package, hoping to catch a good game or at least some interesting sports talk. Settled on a documentary and dug into my meal. It wasn't long before my wife, Nikki, walked in with our kids in tow. Hey, what brings you home so early? She asked, planting a kiss on my cheek. The kids scampered upstairs. Found Greg at Moe's, sloshed as hell. Brought him back here and laid him out in the basement, I explained. She looked hesitant. Are you sure that's a good idea? I don't want any drunken antics in front of the kids. He'll be fine, sweetheart. I'll keep an eye on him, I assured her, feeling her hand caress my cheek, sending a shiver down my spine. That's when she noticed the swelling. Richard, what the hell? Did he do this? I'm all right, honey. Don't worry about it. Rich, get him out of here. Honey, everything's under control. The poor guy just found out his wife was cheating on him a few weeks back, and it happened so publicly. He's on edge. Plus, he's been dealing with it all alone. I'm his friend. He needed an outlet for his pent-up anger, and if that meant taking some hits, I didn't mind. Besides, my jaw's not as fragile as Tarzan's. Maybe he should consider a different costume next year. Nikki couldn't help but chuckle at that. Watching Tarzan get his backside kicked by a pirate was pretty amusing. I doubt Jane would approve. Yeah, Tarzan definitely got what was coming to him. Dominic should spend less time pumping iron and more time hitting the bag, Nikki quipped. Or at least learn to dodge, she added. We shared a laugh once her giggles subsided. One thing I've always admired about Nikki is her personality and sense of humor. It's one of the reasons why I can't stay angry with her for too long. I headed downstairs to check on Greg. His thunderous snoring assured me he was still very much alive, albeit functionally comatose. I slipped a pillow under his head when he let out a sound that could wake the dead. His drink's breath could have knocked out a bull. What the heck, Greg? I muttered, the stench clinging to me. I needed to step away. A few hours later, a zombie-like version of my friend emerged from the abyss. His bloodshot eyes screamed exhaustion and distress as he shuffled around my kitchen. Nikki shot me a silent warning that spoke volumes. Keep him in line or he's out. I approached him in the kitchen. How you feeling, buddy? Feels like my wife cheated on me, humiliated me in front of the whole neighborhood, then ran me over with a truck. At least your memory's intact. 2 out of 3 ain't bad. His eyes narrowed. My memory's fine. I remember your damn story too. Remember how you socked me in the face for it? I rubbed my tender jaw. That part seems fuzzy. Might need a repeat just to be sure it's done. There was no real venom in his words. Despite his talk of wanting to punch me again, I knew he wouldn't. I've said it before, but I'm really sorry about that story, Greg. I didn't think it would reach as many people as it did, and I certainly didn't think you'd find out about it. I was wrong. People actually read it. I even got a message from this guy I know who heard about the party from someone, and then read your story online. Who's this guy? You don't know him. He's this loudmouth named Harry from Virginia. I chuckled. Harry Inva, huh? Heard of him? Nice guy once you get past his attitude. By the way, he's on my side and thinks you're an idiot too, Greg said, grinning. Yeah, well, I'm sure he felt that way before reading the story I wrote about you, I replied. Greg nodded and chuckled. I gave him a friendly pat on the back, which he didn't seem to mind, confirming we were okay. Richard, why'd you have to paint me as a wimp? Did I really just bolt like that? Wimp? Greg, you took the guy down in one punch. I was half expecting you to bite his ear off. If you boxed like that in college, you'd have been a champ. No one sees you as weak. Screw you. It's a skill I've still got. Idiot. He smirked and shook his head. I really handed him his rear, didn't I? Pride and laughter blended in his voice. Hell yeah. Bet your sweet rear you couldn't pull that off, he teased, nudging me. Nah. Might take me 2 hits, I quipped back, unable to stifle a chuckle. It was good to see Greg. So, what went down after I split? Kept looking over my shoulder, thinking I was headed to the slammer. Well, Greg, after you bailed from the Halloween party, Alicia let out this wail like she was facing a firing squad and crumpled to the floor. She sobbed loudly like a broken Catwoman. Nikki rushed to her aid, helping her up and leading her to the couch. Susie, the other Catwoman, came down the stairs with her disgraced Tarzan, holding his head as she guided him. Alicia caught sight of them and flew into a rage. You idiot! What did you tell Greg? You've ruined my life, you idiot! Tarzan, already battered by the pirate, now dodged Catwoman's claws, while Catwoman #2 tried to intervene. Alicia, stop it! Cut it out! Susie yelled, defending her husband. Tarzan, being saved by a woman from a woman, only stoked his fire. Can this idiot embarrass the Jungle Man any further? You should have said something, right? You idiot. Couldn't take no for an answer. What's wrong with you? The Jungle Man regarded Alicia's fury with detachment. It was clear he hadn't grasped everything yet. The knockout must have sobered him up. He knew he'd caused today's pain. Alicia, I'm sorry. I was drunk, he said. She stopped attacking and collapsed to the floor again. What do I do now, Susie? What do I do now? Back to Richard's kitchen. After that, they had to haul Dominic to the ER. Turns out he had a concussion. He wanted to press charges, but Susie and Alicia talked him out of it. Alicia pleaded with him not to. She knew if you got arrested, there'd be little hope of your return. Greg chuckled and shook his head. In any case, there's little hope left for this, I sighed, nodding sadly. So, Greg, what happened after you split? All we heard was the rubber hitting the road and the roar of your engine. I wanted to chase after you, but my Tahoe was packed with other cars. I feared you might crash. You haven't responded to any of our calls. Yeah, well, I needed to get away and think, you know? I couldn't wrap my head around it. All our friends are looking at me, judging me. I needed space. So you headed to your mom's place. It must have been tough going back there. Yeah, well, life throws you curveballs sometimes. The only way to deal with it is to do something out of the ordinary. Greg, October 31st, party crap. Damn it. Damn it, these damn women. I sped recklessly along side streets leading out of town. Honestly, I had no clue where I was going. Stop signs, speed limits, traffic lights, none of it mattered. I drove like I was the only one on the road that mattered. What's that sound? I glanced at the passenger seat, recognizing Alicia's ringtone. Her lovely face illuminated my Android screen. She smiled at me, a loving smile captured in time. I remember taking this photo. I was so happy. So full of love and adoration. Damn lie. I fought the urge to chuck my phone out the window. Her picture on the screen lied to me. If I answered, the voice on the other end would lie to me. The cheerful melody announcing her call was a lie. Lies. She slept with Dominic. Maybe they even kissed. Passionately. Excitedly. Damn it. I bet the idiot loved it. Another man's wife in his bed? Who did he think he was? I was the one by her side when she was sick. In the delivery room with her twice, promising to love her in sickness and health. I devoted my life to her. The persistent ringtone tormented me with its falsehoods. He paused for a moment, then continued. I shut it off and pulled out the battery. Silence. No more lies. I drove aimlessly around the city, my mind on autopilot, protecting itself from overload. The images of tonight's events and worse, the scenarios I imagined between my wife and that idiot in the jungle, were overwhelming my mind, overclocking my processor. Reality hit me when I gazed up and found myself parked in front of my parents' garage. I couldn't recall driving here. It seemed my subconscious guided me back to my childhood abode. Cutting the engine, I entered. Every child holds a key to their parents' home, even if they vowed never to return. Well, perhaps not every child, but in my case, it was late. The living room, unchanged for decades, greeted me in darkness. The sofa, coffee table, lamp, all fixtures frozen in time exactly as I remembered them. Strangely, I found solace in this familiarity. That night, in one drunken conversation with a Neanderthal, everything changed in an instant. I've always been skeptical of stories where worlds shift in a blink, except in tragedy. This night turned me into a believer. My entire understanding of life was upended by a single conversation. Returning to my childhood home brought a sense of stability after an earthquake shatters buildings and fractures the ground. In such times, people crave calmness. Stability was what I needed now. For the moment, I was safe at home. "Who's there?" My mom's voice rang out, envisioning her wielding a baseball bat, ready to fend off intruders. "It's me, Ma." "Gregory?" "Yes." Suddenly, the light flicked on, momentarily blinding me. I squinted to shield my eyes. "Why on earth are you skulking around in the dark? Trying to give me a heart attack?" "Glad to see you too, Mom." As my eyes adjusted, I faced an elderly lady, clad in floral pajamas, hair in curlers. "Why are you here at this hour? And what's with the idiotic outfit?" Straight to the point. "That's my mother." In that moment, I realized I was still in most of my pirate costume. My hat, parrot, and eye patch were long gone. Now I just looked, well, like an idiot. "Long story, Ma. Listen, I'll be staying here for a while. The kids will leave tomorrow, but I'll be back. I'll fill you in, but not in front of them." Okay. I didn't ask her to stay with her. I simply informed her of my intentions. This might appear odd to most, but it's normal for us. My family isn't what you'd call affectionate. My dad is straightforward, never saying more than necessary and expecting the same in return. Hugs are brief, "I love you," reserved for dire moments. My parents were a perfect match, both reserved in affection. How they even conceived me remains a puzzling mystery. They were either destined to find each other or destined to suffer alone. "All right, Gregory, you know where everything is. I'm going back to bed." My mom's frail figure vanished around the corner, her voice trailing. "And lock up." The next morning, I checked my phone, finding 29 missed calls. 15 from Alicia, some from Richard, and a few from others at the party. I ignored them, knowing they'd likely consist of people eager for gossip about the affair. After a restless night, pain, anger, and confusion lingered. I also wondered about the police. What happened to Dominic after I left? Did he go to the hospital, press charges? Would I end up in jail? I slipped out of the house before my mom woke, leaving a note explaining my departure. If Alicia called, Mom was instructed to inform her I'd reach out when ready. I parked near my favorite bar, seeking solace in strong drink to numb the pain. For the next couple of weeks, I hid at my mom's, only encountering Alicia when dropping off the kids or fetching belongings. Our interactions were strained, ending with her upset. Before leaving, I overheard her talking on the phone, ears perking up as I listened. If it had been the creep, I would have lost it. But it was Susie, her half of the conversation leaving me unsure if it was better or worse. I divided my free time between my parents' place and the bar. With Dad away on business, it was just Mom and me. Oh, joy. Deep conversations weren't her thing, though she listened attentively and offered support, even if she didn't fully grasp the situation. I'd never discuss adult films with her, especially after her warnings in my younger years about blindness and hairy palms. During my stay, we spoke little. I outlined why I was staying, and she listened, but didn't press for details. When she asked what I'd do next, all I could do was shrug and admit I didn't know. "You'll figure it out," was her encouraging response. We didn't revisit the topic. Oddly comforting, it spared me from endless retelling and emotional coddling. I was free to grieve in my own way. Taking all my sick and personal days, I couldn't face anyone, even though no coworkers were at the party. Living in a small town, gossip spread like wildfire. I wasn't just dealing with infidelity, it was public humiliation. Poor Greg, too busy with obscene films to satisfy his wife. Eventually, I had to shut off my phone. It kept ringing incessantly, faces pleading for answers. Screw them all. Whether the universe or Dominic's pride intervened, the cops never came. It was intriguing to observe my friends' behavior. They sent emails and even called, yet none visited my parents' house. I realized that when people are unsure what to say, they often avoid the situation altogether. They weren't neglectful friends, just unsure how to help. This silence, both a curse and a blessing, left me alone with my thoughts constantly. To quiet the disturbing images in my mind, I sought solace in drinks at the bar, with Karen becoming both my deity and my salvation. The hardest part about staying with my mother was being separated from my children. It was self-imposed exile, but it still stung. I knew seeing them meant facing Alicia, akin to reaching a warm bed across a half-frozen lake, so I drank even more to numb the pain. It took Karen showing me a story, Caught Cat Women, penned by a friend, to break the cycle. It mirrored my own script, featuring 2 cat women, a pirate, that damn Tarzan, Superman, and Hulk. The nerve. Fuming, I dialed 7 digits. Good morning, Mr. Kirkson's office. This is Betty. How can I help you today, Richard? Today, at Richard's place. So, what's the plan with Alicia? Divorce? Separation? Give her a thrashing? Greg chuckled sadly and stared at his plate. Do I have to choose? He quipped, lacking enthusiasm. I saw the agony etched on his face, replaying Halloween's events in his mind, her words echoing like a broken record. Greg, I've got to ask. You can tell me to buzz off if it's too personal, but about that adult film? What did she mean? Greg blushed, shifting uncomfortably. So what? I watch them occasionally, not every day. Are you implying she doesn't or you don't? He retorted defensively. Sure, I watch them, but Alicia said you were viewing them instead of being carnal with her. That's true. Buzz off, Richard. It's too personal. All right, buddy, fair enough. But I just want to understand what went wrong. You two seemed so happy. I never suspected a thing. He gazed down at his meal while his fork traced circles on the plate. She just doesn't get it, Rich. What's she not getting? Greg let his fork drop and ran his hands over his face, taking a deep breath. It was a sigh tinged with sadness, perhaps mixed with guilt. I work 10 to 12 hours every day, sometimes even 5 days a week if I'm lucky. When I get home, I'm exhausted. I'm stressed out. I deal with irate investors, clients, managers, carnal molestation claims, discrimination claims, and everything in between. It all falls on my shoulders. If something goes wrong at the restaurants, like some customer claiming to have spotted a rat and demanding free food, I'm the one who has to handle it. He paused, gathering himself to continue. I listened, waiting for him to spill it all out. Alicia requires a lot of foreplay. A lot. I have to spend 30 minutes just on foreplay. Then, when she's ready, we can start having physical engaging. She likes to change positions frequently. On top of that, she wants me to talk dirty to her throughout. I love my wife, I really do. And when I have the energy, it's fantastic. I know guys who complain that their wives are frigid, unimaginative, or just want to get it over with. Alicia is none of those. But I don't have the stamina to do this every night, especially after dealing with all the crap I face during the day. He paused, glancing away. Rich, sometimes I just feel better being alone. I hate to admit it. Every man dreams of a woman like Alicia. A passionate woman who genuinely enjoys lovemaking. I know I'm lucky to have her. But I noticed his eyes starting to cloud over. It's tough to reconcile the pain of marriage when you realize the part you played in your own troubles. I do so much for her, for the girls. I work my backside off to give them everything I didn't have as a kid. My dad was very thrifty. He only bought what I needed. I want more for my girls. And then there's my wife, and I enjoy spending time with them. They're my whole world. But sometimes, I just wish I didn't have to do something for someone else. When I come home after dealing with all the crap at work, sometimes I don't always want to be a dad or a husband or a boss. I think I missed a bit of that. How long has it been since you two were carnal? Before the party. He shook his head. I don't know, Rich. I really don't know. I didn't even realize so much time had passed. I nodded, a flicker of understanding dawning on me. Then I saw anger flash in his eyes. But that doesn't give her the right to do what she did. Though, Richard, I didn't humiliate her in front of everyone. I didn't cheat on her. She should have come to me with our issues. Why didn't she come to me? I had to take a risk with my next remark. It was crucial to convey my point to him without seeming like I was taking her side. Maybe for the same reason you never explained to her why you watch adult films. Communication can be tough, especially if you don't realize you need to say something in the first place. How do you communicate your unhappiness to your spouse? Simply put, you say, "I'm unhappy." Touché. Things were escalating too much. Usually at moments like this, I'd crack a joke, so I switched gears. "So, Greg, about my wall." He caught on that I was teasing him and grinned, shaking his head. "Call it even for this one." Idiot. I thought the punch in the face had evened things out. Not quite. I chuckled. Seeing Greg as he was before Halloween was refreshing, even if it was fleeting. Fair enough. That's when I noticed Nikki standing in the doorway with a peculiar expression. Her eyes urged me to see her right away. I left Greg to his meal and approached her. "What's wrong, dear?" She glanced around nervously and drew me closer to whisper. "Somehow Alicia found out Greg's here. She's on her way. Damn, John. Probably called her to vent or something stupid. Unknowingly gave away Greg's location. You need to intercept that woman at the door." Nikki. Nikki raised her hands and shook her head. "Rich, I'm not getting involved in this mess. Greg needs to face this. He's been avoiding her for 2 weeks. I felt frustration rising toward my wife. She cheated on him. Haven't you forgotten that? No, I haven't. I've got a damn hole in the wall as a reminder. I glanced at Greg, who seemed oblivious to the impending showdown. What do you want me to do, Nikki? Her expression softened with resolve when she saw my determination to help my friend. He has to handle this himself, babe. You can be there for him as a friend, help him through it, but he can't run from it. She patted my chest and left. I turned to prepare Greg for what was coming. Greg, I heard your conversation. You can't exactly whisper. She's on her way. He rubbed his chin and winced. Then his expression shifted to determination. Fine, he said, pushing away from the table. Turning to me, he met my gaze. I'm ready to face this, he declared. With that, he rose and walked out of my back door. Greg? A beautiful sunset. Soft hues painted the pale sky, serene and almost calming. Greg, honey? The serenity shattered. I didn't respond to the alarmed voice signaling the arrival of my unfaithful wife. I didn't even turn to look at her. My eyes remained fixed on the sky above. Alicia interpreted my lack of reaction as an invitation, which in some sense she wasn't entirely wrong about. She settled beside me on Richard's back porch, drawing her knees to her chest as if seeking protection. I've been searching everywhere for you, honey, she said, starting off in the worst possible way. I've been in the same place all night, I muttered, deliberately echoing the exact words I'd used when I found her cozying up to Dominic in Richard's kitchen a couple of weeks ago. She seemed a bit puzzled by my response. Greg, we need to talk, she said, and I nodded in agreement. From my side vision, I could sense her anguish. I avoided looking directly at her face, but it seemed like a grim sight. Swollen eyes, flushed cheeks, a somber expression. At least that's how her voice conveyed it. I love you, honey. It's a lie. I cut her off. Greg, stop it. Alicia, just stop it. You can't claim to love me and then embarrass me the way you did, airing our issues in public like that. I would never do that to you. What are you talking about, Greg? You did this to me, she said, her voice rising with anger. You stormed down the stairs like a madman in front of everyone. You asked Susie if she knew I was sleeping with her husband, right in front of everyone's eyes. If you wanted to talk privately, you could have pulled me aside and yelled at me in the car. But no, you were the first one to air out my business like that. In a way, she had a point. I didn't see it that way at the time. I was blinded by rage. Okay, Alicia, I'll give you that, but I didn't initiate this. Your damn boyfriend confronted me, telling me all about your indiscretions in front of other people. I handled it the best I could. I was furious, rightfully so. Could I have handled it differently? I paused to rein in my emotions. But I didn't cheat with anyone, I continued. You didn't have someone come up to you and rub my betrayal in your face. I looked her squarely in the eyes. The anger drained from her expression, replaced by remorse and guilt. I know, Greg, she said softly. I simply shook my head. Do you really think so, Alicia? Do you really? Her eyes sparked again. Maybe you didn't physically betray me, Greg, but you weren't present for me. Remember last night when I wanted closeness? And you? I shook my head. It was on my birthday. I treated myself to some beautiful lingerie from Victoria's Secret. It was so hot. I indulged in a fragrant bubble bath, getting excited thinking about the night ahead. I lathered my body with eucalyptus-scented lotion, spent an hour doing my hair and makeup. Do you recall that night? I did remember that night. That was the day I had to fire Frank. He was my close friend, one of my assistant managers back when I worked at Olive Garden. We'd become good friends over the years. When the allegations surfaced, I stood up for him vehemently. I was certain he wouldn't do something so reckless. But the girl had text messages. Damn text messages. When they emerged, I was livid. I was the one who promoted him. I was the one who vouched for him. And I was the one who had to deal with it. Or they'd deal with me. So, needless to say, I wasn't in the best mood that evening. But I didn't forget her birthday. I made a reservation at her favorite restaurant, all set for a nice dinner. But all Alicia wanted that night was dessert. We went out to dinner for your birthday, and then we made love that night. Alicia, I recalled this. She shook her head sadly. We had love-making, Greg. You couldn't even enjoy it. Then when I tried to cuddle with you, you pushed me away, saying you were tired. That's why I gave you space. Her voice caught, and she swallowed hard. I knew she wasn't finished yet, so I waited for her to continue. Then I woke up in the middle of the night. I saw you at your computer. I saw you watching adult films and pleasuring yourself. The words came out forcefully, and then she broke down. Her body trembled as she tried to cry silently, but to no avail. I sat beside her, speechless. Slowly, I began to grasp her perspective. Hearing her side of things opened my eyes. Until tonight, she was just a deceitful cheater. Now, I wasn't so sure who she really was. I get it, Alicia, all right? I took you for granted. But do you truly grasp this, Greg? Do you comprehend how deeply this devastated me? Can you fathom the pain of realizing that, at your best, you're not enough to satisfy your husband? I doubt you do. After that, I made a pact with myself to stop initiating lovemaking with you. I wanted you to desire me, but you never did. So, that's why you ended up with Dominic. Did he make you feel like a woman? She sniffled beside me and wiped her nose on her sleeve. Yes, Greg, he and Susie did. Damn it. Susie and I got drunk once in high school. Something happened that night. In the morning, we were mortified. We chalked it up to the drinks and pretended it never occurred. Well, over a decade later, I found myself at her doorstep in tears. A few weeks afterward, feeling like the most inadequate woman alive, I went to her place. I was so low, so shattered. I told her I needed to get drunk, and we did. The feeling of inadequacy started to fade, but it never truly went away. And how did you end up in bed with her and Glass Joe? Dominic came home from work and found us completely wasted. Susie confided in him about my issues. He began telling me how beautiful I was, how he desired me. Susie backed him up, mentioning our past in high school. He got excited and suggested we kiss. We were so drunk that we obliged. It all began with a playful kiss, but before I knew it, things had escalated beyond control. How many times did you sleep with them? She turned to gaze at the now darkened sky above us and whispered, Twice. It stung. The drunken episode was bad enough. I could eventually move past it, but knowing she'd been with them again was a whole other blow. So, at the party in the kitchen, what were you and Dominic discussing? Her eyes flashed with anger and a hint of guilt as she recalled it. He was drunk, complimenting my hot costume and suggesting we go to their place for some fun. I was worried someone might overhear, so I tried to hush him. I admitted my mistake, saying the three of us couldn't continue. Then he got a bit forceful, pressing against me. That's when you walked over? Yes. I gathered my lingerie in a pile. Wasn't that what you said? She nibbled her lip, shaking her head. I was furious, Greg. Seeing Dominic pestering me like that just reminded me how little you valued me. Were you planning on heading to his place later for some fun since he appreciated you? She shook her head, locking eyes with me. No. I was hoping you'd finally take the initiative. I chose the Catwoman outfit because I knew you loved Michelle Pfeiffer in Batman Returns. You once told me how you fell for her because of that suit. I saw the way you looked at me in it. I saw desire in your eyes. Mine. I almost skipped the party altogether to get what I'd been yearning for. I wish I had. I hoped when we got home you'd take me. And then Dominic happened. She spat his name out. Well, none of this would have happened if you hadn't slept with him. Why didn't you just talk to me, Alicia? She sadly shook her head again, sniffing. I don't know, Greg. I wish I did. Lord knows why I didn't. Well, I guess there's enough blame to go around. She turned to me, hopeful. So what now? Greg, I don't want to lose you. I love you so much. I'd do anything for us to get through this. My head swirled. Can we get through this? Can I forgive her, knowing I played a part in our downfall? Leave the past behind? I don't know, Alicia. So much has happened. It'll take a lot for us to start healing from this. A glimmer of hope sparked within her. She wiped her tears, gripping my hand. Please, honey, I'll do anything. Just give me a chance to show you how much I love you. I met her gaze, sensing hope. I began to feel it too. It'd take time, but maybe we could mend each other. If we both fought hard enough, there might be a chance. All right, Alicia, but it'll take several steps. First, we need counseling. It's necessary. Obviously, we have a lot to work through. We need to learn how to communicate with each other. She kissed my cheek, embracing my neck. Yes, darling, whatever you say. Secondly, you need to cut ties with Susie. That's when I saw the light fade from her eyes, feeling it dim in my heart. Well, what did you say? I said you need to end your friendship with Susie. Greg, why are you asking me to do this? I reclined in my chair, staring at her in disbelief. Seriously, Alicia? You cheated on me with her and her husband. What do you expect me to do? Just trust that it won't happen again? Every time you're with her or talk to her, do you realize what goes through my mind? How can I heal if this wound keeps getting salt rubbed in it? She recoiled as if I'd struck her, tears welling up in her eyes. We locked eyes in silence as seconds stretched into eternity. You want me to choose between my best friend and my husband? I can't do it, Greg. Please don't make me. Words couldn't convey the agony that coursed through me at that moment. Strangely, it was worse than catching her in the act. This time, there was no anger to mask it. My heart constricted painfully, crushed by the weight of the realization that it was too much to bear. The fact that she couldn't choose me over her best friend was devastating, a catastrophe of unfathomable proportions. The woman I loved most didn't love me the same way. I wasn't her one and only love. I shared her heart with another. Dominic's irrelevant now. I don't care about him. This is bigger, Alicia. But she couldn't sever her ties with Susie. The bond was too strong, rivaling her love for me. She couldn't let it go, even if it meant sacrificing our marriage. Sadly, we divorced less than a year later. Alicia fought tooth and nail to prevent it, even stooping to humiliating herself. I never imagined I'd see her pride crumble like that. She begged me at my workplace not to leave her, embarrassing herself in front of everyone. I begged too. It was a heart-wrenching plea that left everyone uncomfortable. Even I secretly hoped I'd give her another chance. But I couldn't bear the thought of her being around him as long as she refused to relinquish her friendship. In essence, I was right. No spouse should have to share. A year later, the wounds still run deep. There are no winners here. We do our best for the kids, avoiding putting each other down in their presence. Yet, many nights I've been a shoulder for Greg to cry on. But there was one silver lining this Halloween. He brought a date to my party. She wasn't dressed as Catwoman. Maybe she's just a rebound, not his next great love. But finding someone new is still progress. Real life isn't about neatly packaged endings. It's a messy, gradual healing process. Alicia, Dominic, and Susie didn't show up at the party. They cut off contact with the rest of us. Susie remained staunchly by Alicia's side, accusing Greg of unfairness and trying to force an impossible choice. In my view, the choice wasn't impossible. Alicia simply didn't want to be married as much as a loving wife should. She claimed she'd do anything, but actions speak louder than words. She might have been willing to play the part of a love-making slave or a doting housewife, but when it came to sacrificing something personally significant, our marriage wasn't worth it to her. In the end, he's better off without her.
Perfect, a scene out of a fairy tale. Emily and James's engagement party sparkled with joy, love filling the air. As they shared a kiss under twinkling lights, Emily felt her future was bright, but a nagging thought about James's evasiveness regarding his grandmother lingered. Wedding preparations were in full swing, but James's reluctance to involve his grandmother troubled Emily. Driven by curiosity, she visited the grandmother's rundown home, discovering she was neglected and heartbroken. Confronting James, Emily learned of his cruel indifference. Her world shattered. Emily called off the wedding. In the end, she found solace in caring for the grandmother, forming an unexpected bond. They found happiness together, proving that compassion can lead to new beginnings. What would you do if you discovered a dark secret about someone you loved? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more incredible stories. Hello, my friends. I hope all you are fine. This is Narrative Stories channel. Let's start this story. The night was perfect, a scene straight out of a fairy tale. The elegant ballroom was decorated with twinkling fairy lights, soft music played in the background, and the air was filled with laughter and joy. Emily, in a stunning red dress, floated from guest to guest, her radiant smile lighting up the room. James, looking dashing in his tailored suit, stayed close by her side, his arm around her waist. The love between them was palpable, and everyone could see it. As the evening progressed, the couple shared a kiss under the glow of the chandeliers, a moment captured by their friends and family, who cheered and applauded. To Emily and James, the perfect couple, someone toasted, and the room echoed with clinking glasses and heartfelt congratulations. Emily's heart was full. She believed she had found her soulmate, the man she would spend the rest of her life with. Little did she know, a shocking discovery was just around the corner, one that would turn her world upside down. The couple moved through the room, receiving warm wishes and hugs from loved ones. Emily's best friend, Sarah, pulled her aside, beaming. "I'm so happy for you, Emily. James is a great guy. You're going to have an amazing life together." Emily nodded, her eyes shining. "I know, Sarah. I feel so lucky. Everything is just perfect." But even amidst the celebration, a nagging thought tugged at the back of Emily's mind. She had noticed that James never spoke much about his family, particularly his grandmother, who was supposedly very dear to him. Whenever she brought it up, James would change the subject or give a vague response. At the time, she brushed it off, thinking it was just his way of dealing with family matters. However, something about it didn't sit right with her. The days turned into weeks, and wedding preparations were in full swing. Emily immersed herself in the whirlwind of planning, eager to create the perfect day. She spent hours trying on wedding dresses, each more beautiful than the last, visiting potential venues, and coordinating with florists and caterers. Her friends were by her side, helping her make decisions and sharing in her excitement. Yet, as the plans progressed, Emily couldn't shake off the feeling that something was amiss. James seemed distant whenever she mentioned his grandmother. One evening, as they were looking through the guest list, Emily brought it up again. "James, I noticed your grandmother isn't on the list. I thought she was really important to you." James looked up from the list, a shadow crossing his face. "She is, but she's not well. It would be too much for her to travel and be a part of all this. Let's not worry about it." Emily frowned, but decided not to press the issue. She wanted everything to be perfect and didn't want to cause any unnecessary tension. However, the seed of doubt had been planted. She couldn't understand why James would be so reluctant to involve his grandmother, especially if she meant so much to him. As the wedding date drew nearer, Emily's curiosity grew. She felt a strong urge to meet James's grandmother, to understand why he was so evasive about her. Despite James's reassurances, Emily decided she needed to see for herself. She wanted to know the woman who had supposedly played a significant role in his life. Little did she know, her decision would uncover a heartbreaking truth. One sunny afternoon, Emily found herself driving through the outskirts of town, following the directions to James's grandmother's house. The neighborhood grew less affluent as she drove, the houses smaller and more run down. Her heart pounded with anticipation and a touch of anxiety. She wondered what kind of woman she was about to meet and why James had been so reluctant to involve her in their lives. When she finally arrived, Emily was taken aback by the sight of the small, dilapidated house. The garden was overgrown with weeds, and the paint was peeling off the walls. It was a stark contrast to the image she had of James's family. She parked her car and walked up the narrow path to the front door, feeling a mix of curiosity and trepidation. Emily knocked gently on the door, and after a moment, it creaked open. An elderly woman stood there, her face lined with age and weariness, but her eyes still bright. "Hello, can I help you?" she asked, her voice soft but tinged with surprise. "Hi, I'm Emily, James's fiancée," Emily replied with a warm smile. "I wanted to meet you and maybe talk about the wedding." The grandmother's eyes widened in surprise and then filled with tears. "Oh, my dear, come in, please." She led Emily into a small, cluttered living room, offering her a seat. "I haven't seen James in so long. He told me he was getting married, but I didn't think I'd ever meet you." As they talked, Emily learned that James's grandmother had been living alone, struggling with health and finances. James had stopped visiting her months ago, saying she was a burden. The more Emily listened, the more her heart broke. How could the man she loved, the man who was so kind and caring to her, treat his own grandmother so cruelly? "I thought he loved me," the grandmother said, tears streaming down her face. "But he told me he couldn't take care of me anymore. I've been managing on my own, but it's been so hard." Emily's mind raced as she tried to process what she was hearing. She felt a surge of anger and sadness. This was not the James she knew, the man she had agreed to marry. How could he be so heartless to his own flesh and blood? That evening, Emily returned home with a heavy heart. She felt betrayed and confused. She loved James, but she couldn't ignore what she had learned. She decided she had to confront him, to hear his side of the story, and understand why he had treated his grandmother so poorly. As they sat in their living room, the tension was palpable. Emily took a deep breath and began. "James, I went to visit your grandmother today." James's face hardened immediately. "Why did you do that, Emily? I told you she wasn't well." "She's more than not well, James," Emily replied, her voice trembling with emotion. "She's living in terrible conditions, neglected and heartbroken. How could you do this to her?" James's eyes flashed with anger. "She never did anything for me growing up. Why should I care about her now? She's just an old woman who expects too much." Emily felt a cold chill run down her spine. This was not the man she thought she knew. "James, she's your grandmother. She needs your help. How can you be so heartless?" "Heartless," James scoffed. "I've done enough. She can't expect me to drop everything for her. I have my own life to live." Emily's heart broke as she realized the truth. James was not the compassionate, caring man she thought he was. She had to make a decision, one that would change her life forever. Emily spent the next few days in a daze, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. She loved James, but she couldn't ignore what she had discovered. She couldn't marry a man who could be so cruel to his own family. After much soul-searching, she knew what she had to do. One evening, Emily sat alone in her room, looking at her engagement ring. Tears streamed down her face as she thought about the future she had envisioned, the life she had planned with James. She knew she had to end it. With a heavy heart, she packed her bags, knowing she couldn't stay any longer. Emily called James to meet her. When he arrived, she took a deep breath and began. "James, I can't marry you. I can't be with someone who can treat their own grandmother so heartlessly." James's face twisted with anger. "You're leaving me over this? You're throwing everything away because of her?" Emily nodded, tears in her eyes. "Yes, because it's not just about her. It's about who you are. I can't be with someone who lacks compassion and kindness." As Emily walked away, she felt a mix of sadness and relief. She knew she had made the right decision, even though it was one of the hardest things she had ever done. In the weeks that followed, Emily found herself visiting James's grandmother regularly. She helped her clean the house, cooked meals for her, and kept her company. The old woman's eyes began to sparkle with a new light, her spirits lifted by Emily's kindness. One afternoon, as they sat together in the garden, the grandmother turned to Emily and said, "Thank you, my dear. You've given me hope and happiness I thought I had lost forever." Emily smiled, feeling a warmth in her heart she hadn't felt in a long time. "You've given me a new purpose," she replied. "We're family now, and I promise I'll always be here for you." The two women, once strangers, had formed a bond that went beyond blood. Emily had found a new path, one filled with compassion and love. She had lost a fiancé, but gained a family. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the garden, Emily and the grandmother sat on a bench, content and happy. They had found each other in the most unexpected way, proving that sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most fulfilling journeys. To Emily and the grandmother, sitting on a bench in a park, smiling and content. Voiceover. What would you do if you discovered a dark secret about someone you loved? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more incredible stories. Thank you for being a part of Narrative Stories. Your support and engagement mean the world to us. We are committed to bringing you the best in storytelling. What kinds of stories would you like to see next? Share your thoughts in the comments below.